The day I sold myself into the Marquis of Lingyang's household, all I had left was half a hard piece of coarse-grained flatbread. My younger brother Lu Qingheng lay in a ruined temple in the south of the city, his face burning red with fever. The physician had said that if he did not take medicine soon, even if he survived the night, the fever might damage his mind. But the last 3 copper coins I possessed were not enough to buy even 1 dose of fever medicine. When the servant broker placed 5 taels of silver in front of me, I stared at it for a long time. In the end, I pressed my fingerprint onto a 5-year indenture and sold myself into the Marquis of Lingyang's household. The broker put away the contract and looked me over. The manor is choosing a personal nanny for the young heir. He has already been weaned, so you won't need to nurse him. You only need to take care of his daily needs. But the child has a fierce temper. More than a dozen people before you were scratched by him. If you're afraid, you can still change your mind now. I clenched the 5 taels tightly in my palm. I'm not afraid. What use was fear? Qingheng was still waiting for that money to save his life. I first entrusted the silver to Aunt Liu, an acquaintance, and asked her to take it to the clinic. Then I followed the broker into the manor. The stone lions outside the Marquis of Lingyang's residence were taller than half the ruined temple where we had been staying. The vermilion gates opened one after another, and neatly dressed servants stood beneath the eaves. I looked down at myself. Mud stained my clothes, the top of one shoe was torn, and my wrist was so thin it looked like little more than bone. The matron leading us frowned. Once you're inside, keep your eyes down, ask fewer questions, and speak less. If the young heir scratches you, you are not allowed to dodge, and you certainly must not hurt him, I answered quietly. Before we even reached the inner courtyard, I heard a heart-wrenching wail. The sound of porcelain shattering followed from inside a room. A woman in her 30s backed out with one hand covering her bleeding face, crying, "Old madam, I truly cannot serve the young heir. He scratches everyone he sees and won't let anyone near him." A number of people stood under the covered veranda. At the center sat a richly dressed elderly woman with gentle features, fingering a strand of Buddhist prayer beads. Beside her stood a young woman in pink, dignified and beautiful, gently consoling her. "Aunt, don't worry. Zhao is still young. Perhaps he simply misses his mother." The old woman sighed. "He's almost 2, yet all he does is cry and make trouble. Yanchuan is always occupied with military affairs. If the child continues like this, what are we to do?" At the name Yanchuan, all the servants nearby lowered their heads. I had heard of Pei Yanchuan, the Marquis of Lingyang, while fleeing famine. He had joined the army at 17 and inherited his title at 23. 2 years earlier, he had led troops to suppress a rebellion in the north and was the youngest marquis in the capital. People said he was cold, hard, and decisive, and that no one in the manor dared defy him. Old Madame Kui looked toward us. "Are these the new girls?" the managing matron answered. "Yes," the broker said, "2 of them have cared for children before." A woman beside me immediately lowered her head. She had 2 children of her own and had worked as a wet nurse. But after hearing the screaming inside, her legs had already begun to tremble. Old Madame Kui swept her gaze over the group and stopped on me. "What is your name?" "I am Lu Jiwei." "Have you cared for children before?" "I cared for my younger brother. I also learned a little about caring for young children from my father." The young woman in pink laughed softly. "You don't even have a child of your own, yet you dare claim you know how to care for the young heir?" I raised my head. "A child always has a reason for crying. First find out why he is uncomfortable. Then we can discuss whether I know how to care for him." The courtyard went silent. The managing matron glared at me, clearly thinking I did not know my place. Old Madame Kui, however, smiled. "At least this girl has some courage. Take her in and let her try." The curtain was lifted. Before I could steady myself, a small white jade bowl flew straight at my face. I shifted aside, and it smashed into several pieces at my feet. On the daybed sat a little child dressed in red brocade. He had delicate doll-like features and large, black shining eyes. At that moment, however, his face was covered in tears, his hair was disheveled, and he glared at me with his lips pressed tight. "You must not dodge," the matron hissed behind me. I ignored her and slowly crouched down. The young heir lifted his hand and lunged toward my face, just as he had scratched the previous woman. At that instant, a soft voice suddenly sounded inside my mind. "It itches. My back itches. They're all stupid. No one knows how to scratch it for me." I froze. The voice had not come from anywhere in the room. The young heir could only make muddled cries aloud. Yet those aggrieved words had entered my mind with perfect clarity. I had carried this secret since childhood. Whenever I was close to a child under 3, I could sometimes hear the strongest thought in that child's heart. As a little girl, I had assumed everyone could do it. Then one day, I revealed where a neighbor's child had hidden some candy. My mother clapped a hand over my mouth and warned me sternly never to speak of such a thing again. She had told me that the most frightening thing in the world was not being different from other people, but letting other people know that you were different. From that day onward, I never revealed the secret again. The young heir had already thrown himself toward me. I avoided his fingernails without retreating, and gently touched his shoulder and back instead. He immediately went stiff, lower, a little to the left. I moved my hand down and lightly scratched through his clothes, just below his left shoulder blade. His crying stopped abruptly. The young heir stared at me with wide eyes. I scratched once more. The corners of his mouth suddenly lifted, and he grabbed my wrist with both hands, giggling. Inside and outside the room, everyone went silent. The little tyrant who had just been crying as if he meant to tear the room apart now had eyes curved like crescents. He leaned softly into my arms. Old Madame Kui rose from her chair. The smile on the pink-clad young woman's face stiffened. Zhao Zhao laughed, someone murmured. The young heir hasn't laughed like that in a long time. I could tell as much from everyone's expression. I was about to examine his back when a deep, cold voice sounded behind me. What did you do to him? The voice was not loud, yet everyone in the room dropped to their knees at once. Greetings, Marquis? I turned. A tall man stood outside the door. He wore a black, narrow-sleeved robe with a dark gold leather belt at his waist. His shoulders were straight, his features cold and stern. He seemed to have just returned from outside, still carrying the chill of autumn with him. This was Pei Yanchuan, the Marquis of Zhenbei. His gaze first fell on the young heir holding on to me, then moved to my face. His eyes were like a lake frozen in winter, without a trace of warmth. Answer me. I suppressed my nervousness. My lord, the young heir's back was itching. I scratched it for him. How did you know? Pei Yanchuan stepped forward. Wet nurses and matrons couldn't tell, yet a maid who entered the household today saw it at a glance. I heard the suspicion in his voice. The child shifted in my arms, and another thought rose inside my head. Father is fierce again. Father only knows how to glare. Stupid father. I nearly laughed and had to lower my head. His voice grew colder. What are you laughing at? I wasn't laughing. Look up! I raised my head. If Qingheng hadn't still been depending on the monthly wages I earned here, I might have told him that his own son was calling him stupid in his heart, but I restrained myself. If my lord does not believe me, you can examine the young heir's back yourself. The child has been uncomfortable for so long, yet before finding out what was wrong, my lord first suspected me of using some trick. Isn't that putting the cart before the horse? Several people drew a sharp breath. The managing matron's face went white. No one, it seemed, had ever dared tell the Marquis of Zhenbei to his face that he did not know how to care for his own child. Pei Yanchuan stared at me for a moment. I thought he might order someone to drag me out. Instead, he bent down and personally opened his son's outer robe. There was no obvious rash on the child's back, only a few small scratch marks beneath the shoulder blade, as though he had been trying desperately to reach the itchy place himself. I rubbed the fabric between my fingers, then the inner lining. An extremely fine layer of white powder came away on my fingertips. My lord, there is something wrong with these clothes. Pei Yanchuan's gaze darkened. Old Madame Cui immediately stepped forward. Zhao Zhao's clothes are made from the best fabric in the manor. How could there be anything wrong with them? I did not answer immediately. I removed the young heir's brocade robe and changed him into a clean cotton shirt, lying nearby. As soon as the garment was changed, the child's body visibly relaxed. Not itchy anymore. Ah Wei is amazing. He had even remembered my name. I turned the brocade robe inside out and found a tiny opening hidden in the lining near the collar. Inside was a thin pinch of powder. The problem isn't the fabric. Someone hid something in the lining. Pei Yanchuan took the garment. Huolin, a sword-bearing guard, immediately entered. My lord, seal off Zhaohua courtyard. No one who touched the young heir's clothes today is allowed to leave. Yes. Old Madame Cui frowned. It's only some powder that causes itching. Perhaps it was accidentally picked up during washing. There are so many people in the household. Why cause panic over it? Pei Yanchuan looked at his mother. Mother, do you think it is a small matter that my son has suffered for months? Old Madame Cui's expression changed slightly before she sighed. I only feel sorry for Zhao Zhao. I don't want the entire household thrown into chaos because of this. He said nothing more. He handed the robe to Huolin, then looked at me again. You will remain here for a 3-day trial. If you can take good care of Zhao, you may stay in Zhaohua courtyard. I bowed. I understand, my lord. The young heir seemed to understand. He held onto my hand and refused to let go. Ah Wei, don't go. Ah Wei, stay with Zhao Zhao. At that moment, I looked carefully at his face for the first time. He was so small, yet he had already learned to use screaming and struggling to protect himself. Everyone called him an unruly little tyrant, but what I heard was only a child who could not speak clearly, begging for help again and again. That night, after I soothed him to sleep, I was preparing to examine the clothes that had been removed when the door suddenly opened. Pei Yanxuan stood outside without his guards. In his hand was the powder the manor physician had just examined. "It is an irritant powder," he said. "It won't kill, but prolonged contact can cause persistent itching." He looked at me. "Lu Jue, who exactly are you?" When he asked, I was kneeling beside the young heir's bed. Candlelight traced the side of Pei Yanxuan's face, making his eyes look even deeper. I tucked the blanket around the child. "I am a famine refugee from Qinghe County. My father once ran a medicine shop, so I learned to recognize some medicinal herbs. That is all." "That is all?" He clearly did not believe me. "Your indenture only says both your parents are dead and that you entered the capital with an 11-year-old younger brother. What was your father's name?" My fingers tightened slightly. "Lu Mingyuan." Even now, speaking that name felt like being cut by a dull knife. My father had not died in a natural disaster. He had died because of a fabricated crime. 3 years earlier, while supplying disaster relief medicine for the authorities, he discovered discrepancies in the accounts and reported them to the county magistrate's office. A few days later, the authorities turned around and accused him of substituting inferior medicine and embezzling relief funds. The shop was sealed, and father was sentenced to exile. He never made it out of Qinghe County alive. When mother fled with Qingheng and me, she had only enough time to hide one incomplete account book. Later mother died of illness, and the account book was lost during our flight from the famine. I could not tell Pei Yanxuan those things lightly. He was a marquis, one of the powerful people who stood far above ordinary folk. My father had trusted that powerful men would uphold justice, and our family had been destroyed for it. He was silent for a moment and did not press me further. "Your brother has been sent to Tongren Clinic." The manor physician examined him. "His fever was dangerous, but he can still be treated." I jerked my head up. "The Nanny of Zhaohua courtyard cannot be distracted by family matters," he said coolly, as if his decision had been made solely for the child's sake. But Tongren Clinic was one of the capital's famous medical halls. 5 taels of silver might not even have been enough to cross its threshold. I stood and gave him a solemn bow. "Thank you, my lord." Pei Yanxuan turned to leave. On the bed the young heir rolled over. "Father secretly did a good deed and is still pretending to be fierce." "Stupid father." I pressed my lips together, but I could not stop them from curving. He turned back. "What are you laughing at now?" "I only think the young heir is sleeping very peacefully tonight." He glanced at the child and did not expose me. Over the next few days I hardly left Pei Zhao's side. People in the manor usually called him Little Zhao. Only Pei Yanxuan called him by his full name, Pei Zhao. I discovered that Pei Zhao was not unable to speak. His speech was simply developing more slowly than that of other children his age. He could say things such as water and no, but he rarely spoke. Whenever someone forced him to talk, he would throw things, scream, and finally burst into tears. His previous nannies had treated that as bad behavior and scolded him harshly. I heard the true reason in his thoughts. "I want to say it, I can't. They laugh at Zhao Zhao, so I stopped forcing him." I sat on the carpet holding a little wooden horse. "Zhao Zhao, what is this?" He pursed his lips and refused to answer. "This is a little horse. It runs very fast, but it can't talk." He looked at me. "Little horse is stupid too. It can't talk." "Not being able to talk doesn't mean it's stupid," I said softly. "When it wants to speak, it will speak naturally." He slowly crawled over and took the wooden horse from my hand. "Horse," he said, indistinctly but clearly enough. I smiled and nodded. "Yes, a horse." A faint sound came from outside the door. When I looked back, I caught only the corner of a black robe disappearing along the covered walkway. That evening, Pei Yanxuan returned half an hour earlier than usual. When he entered, Pei Zhao was being given medicine. The bowl had barely reached the child's mouth when he shoved it away, splashing brown liquid across the floor. Chunlan, the maid responsible for preparing the medicine, immediately knelt. "The young heir is throwing a tantrum again. Please forgive me, my lord." No matter how I coaxed him, he refused to drink. He frowned. "Hold him." 2 matrons moved forward at once. Pei Zhao was so frightened that he burrowed into my arms. His thoughts became sharp with panic. "No, bitter. There's a strange smell inside. It makes my tummy hurt." I blocked the matrons. "Don't force it down yet." Pei Yanxuan looked at me. The medicine was prescribed by the manor physician. He cannot simply refuse to drink it. I picked up the bowl and smelled it. Besides the several calming herbs prescribed by the physician, there was a faint pungent scent mixed in. I dipped a fingertip into the medicine and tasted a trace. There is an extra herb in this asarum. Chun's face changed at once. Nonsense. The medicine was prepared exactly according to the prescription. Asarum is pungent and warming, with a strongly dispersing action. A small amount can be used medicinally, but the young heir is weak, and the physician's calming prescription contains no such herb. If taken repeatedly, it can cause dry mouth, irritability, and abdominal pain. I looked at Pei Yanchuan. My lord can call the physician here and ask him. Chunlan dropped to her knees with a thud. I don't know anything. The medicinal ingredients are sent over by the kitchen steward. I only prepare the medicine. He did not punish anyone immediately. He ordered Huolin to seal the dregs and all remaining ingredients. When the manor physician arrived, he confirmed that I was right. A serum had indeed been mixed into the medicine sent to the small kitchen. Matron Zhao, who managed the medicinal stores, insisted it had been a mistake. I'm old and my eyesight is poor. The two herbs were stored close together. I truly did not mean to harm the young heir. She wept bitterly. There was no direct evidence, so Pei Yanchuan only had her detained for the time being. That night, Pei Zhao woke in terror again. He huddled in the corner of the bed, soaked in sweat, refusing to close his eyes no matter how I comforted him. The bell rang. The bad person is coming. I held my breath. The courtyard was silent. I heard no bell at all, but Pei Zhao clearly had heard one before. What bell? He could not answer. He only covered his ears. I extinguished the lamp, held him close, and hid beside the window, waiting in the darkness. About a quarter of an hour later, a faint jingling sounded outside. It was so soft that anyone who was not deliberately listening would have missed it. Pei Zhao began trembling all over. I flung the window open. A dark figure darted past the foot of the wall. Someone come! The guards rushed into the courtyard. They managed to seize only an old woman responsible for sweeping. She had a string of small bronze bells hidden on her. She confessed that she had acted on Matron Zhao's orders. Every night she was to shake the bells outside the window. Matron Zhao had told her that, because the young heir was small, making him cry more at night would leave him sleepy during the day and easier to care for. The excuse was absurd. Pei Yanchuan questioned Matron Zhao until deep into the night, but she stubbornly insisted that she only wanted the child to be quiet during the day. She denied taking orders from anyone else. Early the next morning, Matron Zhao was dragged out of the manor. Pei Yanchuan stood under the covered veranda, watching her being taken away. His face was colder than the winter night. She served in this household for 16 years. I understood what he meant. If even a servant who had been here for 16 years could hurt his child, whom could he trust in this manner? My lord, Matron Zhao was only a pawn. I know. The person behind this dared to strike repeatedly. They won't stop because one chess piece has been lost. Pei Yanchuan turned his head toward me. Aren't you afraid? I am, I answered truthfully. But Zhao Zhao can't even explain what has happened to him. If there isn't a single person beside him willing to listen carefully, wouldn't he be even more pitiful? Pei Yanchuan was silent for a long time. That evening, he suddenly came to Zhaohua courtyard. Pei Zhao saw him and immediately turned his face away. Father is here. Father doesn't hold Zhao Zhao. He stood beside the daybed, clearly uncertain what to do. I lifted the child and held him out. My lord, you can put the young heir to sleep tonight. He frowned. I don't know how. You can learn. All the servants around us lowered their heads, but their shoulders trembled as though they were desperately holding back laughter. Apparently no one had ever dared order the Marquis around like this. Pei Yanchuan hesitated, then finally extended his arms. His posture was indeed wrong. His arms were rigid, as if he were holding an explosive weapon instead of a child. Pei Zhao's mouth turned down. So stiff. Father is like a big stone. I suppressed a laugh and stepped closer, guiding his wrist. Relax here. Support his back. Use your other arm to hold his legs securely. Don't leave him dangling. I was very close to Pei Yanchuan, close enough to catch the faint scent of pine wood on his clothes. His arms were strong, but they were stiff from nervousness. My lord, you aren't holding a saber. I know, then why are you holding him so rigidly? He looked down at me. Only then did I realize I had spoken too bluntly again. I spoke out of turn. Is this the first time you've spoken out of turn? I expected him to be angry, but the corner of his mouth seemed to move. Pei Zhao wriggled in his arms. Pei Yanchuan immediately looked away from me and adjusted his hold carefully. I hummed the lullaby mother had once used to soothe Qing Hung. Before I had even finished the lullaby, Pei Zhao had closed his eyes against his father's shoulder. He did not dare move. After a long while he whispered, "Is he asleep?" "He's asleep. What do I do now?" Put him on the bed. He did as I said. The instant Pei Zhao touched the mattress, however, his small hand caught Pan Chuan's robe. He stopped moving. The child did not wake. He merely murmured, "Father." The word was barely more than a sleepy murmur. Pei Yanchuan froze. I watched the ice in his eyes crack little by little. After that night, he began setting aside half an hour every day for Zhaohua courtyard. At first, he only sat nearby and watched. Later, he fed Pei Zhao himself, built wooden blocks with him, and even learned that when the child cried, his first question should be, "Where does it hurt?" He still rarely smiled, but Pei Zhao no longer cried, simply because he saw his father. I thought things were finally improving. 3 days later, old Madame Cui returned to Zhaohua courtyard with the young woman in pink. Her name was Cui Lingyi, old Madame Cui's niece from her maiden family. She personally carried in a bowl of freshly prepared lotus seed soup. "Zhao Zhao has grown thinner lately," she said. "I specially ordered the kitchen to stew something nourishing for him." The moment Pei Zhao saw her, he hid behind me. "The fragrance smells bad. It smelled like this when mother died too." My heart lurched. The incense lingering at Cui Lingyi's sleeve was connected somehow to the death of Pei Zhao's mother. When Cui Lingyi reached out to hold him, I instinctively shifted aside. Her hand stopped in midair, and her smile faded slightly. "Miss Liu, what is the meaning of this? The young heir isn't feeling well today. He shouldn't see too many unfamiliar people. I'm his father's cousin, his aunt. How can I be considered a stranger?" She reached out again. Pei Zhao suddenly knocked over the lotus seed soup she was carrying. The porcelain bowl shattered on the floor, splashing her skirt. Cui Lingyi's face immediately darkened. Old Madame Cui said sternly, "Zhao Zhao is becoming more and more unruly." Pei Zhao shrank into my arms, his thoughts racing. Can't eat. Bitter. Bitter hidden inside something sweet. I crouched down and dipped a silver hairpin into the spilled soup. It did not blacken, but not every poison in the world changed silver. Beneath the sweet scent of lotus seeds, I detected the faintest smell of bitter almonds. "There are bitter almonds in this soup," Cui Lingyi said, "only to moisten the lungs. A small amount is harmless to an adult, but a young child should not consume too much. The young heir is already weak, and the amount in this bowl is excessive." The maid who had followed Cui Lingyi turned pale. "The kitchen made it. It has nothing to do with our young lady." A flash of anger crossed Cui Lingyi's eyes before her gentle expression returned. "I only meant well. Since Miss Liu understands medicine, why didn't you warn us earlier?" "Because I only just smelled it." Old Madame Cui glanced at the broken bowl. "Lingyi would never harm Zhao. The kitchen staff must not have understood the proper amount. Investigate it." In the end, blame once again fell on an old kitchen woman. She insisted she had measured the wrong quantity. She was beaten 20 strokes and expelled from the manor, while Cui Lingyi escaped without consequence. But I remembered Pei Zhao's thought. "It smelled like this when mother died too." Pei Yanchuan's late wife, Su Heng, had died from severe bleeding after giving birth to Pei Zhao. Everyone in the manor said she had always been frail and that the birth had also been difficult, so she had not survived. If Pei Zhao had smelled Cui Lingyi's incense when his mother died, then at the very least Cui Lingyi had been near the birthing room at the time. I began secretly sorting through nearly 2 years of Zhaohua courtyard's accounts: clothes, incense, medicine, food. I recorded every item by date. Father used to say that people who did business could lie, but accounts could not. Accounts might look trivial, yet if you compared them carefully enough, something that did not make sense would always appear. One night, Pei Yanchuan found me still copying ledgers late at night. He stood beside the desk for a long time. "You know how to read accounts?" "My father taught me." An ordinary medicine shop owner taught his daughter to examine government medicinal accounts. My brush stopped. "My lord investigated my father?" "I only asked a few questions." "My lord suspects me. I need to know whether the person remaining beside Zhao can be trusted." His reasoning was not wrong, yet a chill still ran through me. "If my lord does not trust me, you may replace me." Pei Yanchuan frowned. "I did not say I don't trust you. But my lord never directly says what you are thinking. You investigate in secret, test people, and then make every decision for everyone else. This is your manner. So does that mean the people in it do not deserve respect?" His expression darkened. For the first time, we parted on bad terms. That night, however, I went to see Qingheng. His fever had broken, though he was still weak. The physician at the clinic said Pei Yanchuan had not only paid all the medical fees, but had also sent 2 rare old ginseng roots. Qingheng tugged on my sleeve and asked quietly, "Sister, have the people in the Marquis' household bullied you?" "No." "What about the Marquis?" I remembered Pei Yanchuan questioning me with that cold face. "His temper isn't very good." Qingheng immediately grew nervous. "Sister, let's return his money. I can copy books later or carry goods." You don't need to sell yourself. I stroked his hair. The indenture has already been signed. It isn't something I can end just because I want to. Focus on getting well. When I have saved enough to redeem myself, we'll leave. I said those words for Qingheng, but also for myself. I could not forget that I was a servant purchased by the Pei household, simply because the Marquis showed me occasional kindness. When I returned to the manor, the Duchess of Anguo happened to be visiting old Madame Kui with her little grandson. The boy was not yet 3, sturdy and lively. The moment he entered, he reached toward the pastries on the table. Standing nearby, I suddenly heard his thought. My throat itches, I can't breathe. I spun around. Large red welts were already spreading across his face, and his breathing had become rapid. The Duchess of Anguo panicked. Chenger, what's wrong? I rushed over and saw half a peanut pastry clenched in his hand. Is he unable to eat peanuts? The personal maid's expression changed. The young master ate them once when he was little and broke out in a rash all over. The physician said he must never touch peanuts again. The pastries on the table were clearly osmanthus cakes, yet crushed peanuts had been mixed into them. A faint whistling was already coming from the child's throat. I immediately ordered warm water and salt to be brought and sent someone for the manor physician. Before he arrived, I cleared the remaining pastry from the child's mouth, pressed his back to help him breathe, and stimulated pressure points using a method father had taught me. The child suddenly coughed up a large lump of phlegm and was finally able to draw in air. When the physician arrived, he continued treating him. Only after half an hour did the red welts on the boy's face slowly begin to recede. The Duchess of Anguo held her grandson and wept, thanking me again and again. Cui Lingyi, however, said coldly from the side, Miss Lu certainly knows how to do everything, but she's only a nanny. How did she happen to know there were peanuts on the table? I looked at her, because the young master became ill immediately after eating the pastry. If Miss Kui thinks I planned it in advance, then why not investigate who prepared the pastries? The pastries had been brought by Cui Lingyi. Her face changed. The Duchess of Anguo looked at her as well. Cui Lingyi hurried to explain that her family's cook had been careless and had not known the boy could not eat peanuts. She was not held responsible, but the incident left the Duchess of Anguo with lingering doubts about her. Afterward, the Duchess rewarded me with 100 taels of silver. That was 20 times the price of my 5-year indenture. For the first time, I truly saw the possibility of buying my freedom. Old Madame Kui also suddenly became warm toward me. She summoned me to Qian Hall and said gently, You know how to care for children and understand medicine, that is rare. But in the end, you are still only a maid. When Zhao Zhao grows older, what future will you have? I did not answer, she continued. Zhanchuan has never had a woman serving closely at his side. If you are willing, I can make you his bedchamber maid. If you bear him a son or daughter, I can later raise you to the rank of concubine. You would have wealth and comfort for the rest of your life. At last, I understood why she had suddenly become so amiable. She was not promoting me. She wanted to bind me forever to a lowly status. If I became his bedchamber maid, no matter what I accomplished afterward, people would say I had traded my body for status. More importantly, old Madame Cui wanted to use me to quiet the outside pressure urging Pei Yanchuan to remarry and buy more time for Cui Lingyi. Thank you for your kindness, old madam, but I must refuse. The smile on her face faded. You think the position is too low? I sold myself to save my younger brother. I did not sell the rest of my life. Serving the Marquis would be a blessing one could only earn over several lifetimes. I cannot accept such a blessing. Footsteps suddenly sounded from behind the screen. Pei Yanchuan walked out. He had been there the entire time. Old Madame Cui smiled. You came at the right time. I was trying to make arrangements for Jiwei, but she refuses my kindness. He looked at me. You do not want to remain in this household? I met his eyes. I will fulfill the term of my indenture and care for the young heir with all my heart, but I will not become anyone's bedchamber maid. What if I grant you a different status? What status? He did not answer immediately, but I already understood. Perhaps he was willing to give me a courtyard, gold and silver, even the title of concubine. Yet all of that would still be something he bestowed on me. He still had not asked what I actually wanted. My lord, I do not need you to arrange my life for me. The faint warmth that had just appeared in Pei Yanchuan's eyes vanished at once. Lu Jiwei, do you know what you are refusing? I know. Good. He turned and walked away, his back as cold as an unsheathed blade. After that day, he did not step into Zhaohua courtyard for 5 straight days. Pei Zhao looked toward the doorway every day. Father is angry. Father misses Awei. Father won't come. Zhao Zhao misses him too. I pretended not to hear. On the 6th day, while sorting through some of Pei Zhao's old belongings, I noticed that the wooden handle of a rattledrum had come loose. When I took it apart, a tiny folded piece of paper fell out. The paper had yellowed. Several medicinal ingredients and a string of quantities were written on it. Astragalus, 300 jin. Atractalodes, 200 jin. Poria, 500 jin. I only looked once before my hands began to shake. Those quantities were exactly the same as the batch of disaster relief medicine my father had been accused of embezzling years ago. At the bottom of the paper was another line written in delicate small characters. The medicine has been replaced. The account records are in the Marquis of Lingyang's household. If anything happens to me, investigate Qinghe County's disaster relief register from the 15th year of Yongning. The note was signed with the single character Su. This had been left by Pei Zhao's mother. I was about to put the note away when Pei Yanchuan's voice sounded from outside. "What are you holding?" I did not hide it. I handed the note to him. After reading it, his face slowly darkened. This is Ah Hung's handwriting. Ah Hung was the intimate name he used for his late wife Su Hung. I asked, did Madam ever go to Qinghe County? No. Then how did she know the disaster relief medicine in Qinghe County had been replaced? Pei Yanchuan closed his eyes briefly. Her maternal family dealt in medicinal herbs. In the 15th year of Yongning, they helped the court escort a shipment of medicine north. They encountered bandits on the road and lost more than half the shipment. When the court later examined the accounts, it discovered that the disaster area had still signed for the full amount. Someone had used old, inferior medicine to make up the missing quantity. Madam discovered that? She only told me there was something wrong with that shipment. I was fighting in the north at the time. She wrote 3 letters. I received only 1. His voice remained calm, but I heard the regret pressed beneath that calmness. Su Hung had discovered clues before giving birth. After she died, all the leads had gone cold. My father had become the scapegoat. Pei Yanchuan folded the note away. Do not tell anyone about this yet. How does my lord intend to investigate? I have my own arrangements. Again those words. I felt irritated but did not argue. He was the Marquis and had his own methods. What I needed to do was protect Pei Zhao. Before long, the young heir's 2nd birthday arrived. The manor held a banquet, and many nobles from the capital came to offer congratulations. Old Madame Cui placed particular importance on the event. She said it would dispel the rumors outside the household that the young heir was foolish and uncontrollable. Pei Zhao could now say many simple words and no longer threw things at random. The guests were surprised to see him sitting obediently beside Pei Yanchuan. Cui Lingyi smiled and handed him a jade pendant. Zhao, call me Aunt Lingyi. Pei Zhao pressed his lips together and said nothing. Old Madame Cui's expression darkened slightly. I crouched beside him. If you don't want to say it, you don't have to. Cui Lingyi looked at me. The young heir is the future master of this household. He must learn propriety. If you indulge him like this, won't he grow up lawless? Pei Zhao suddenly wrapped his arms around my neck. Ah Wei. It was the first time he had clearly called my name in front of everyone. Laughter immediately rose around us. The Duchess of Anghua was especially delighted. Zhao has improved so much. Miss Lu truly knows how to teach a child. Cui Lingyi's smile nearly collapsed. Halfway through the banquet, I took Pei Zhao back to Zhaohua courtyard to rest. Before his nap, he held my hand tightly. Ah Wei, don't go. There is a bad smell today. What bad smell? He pointed toward the window but could not explain. I did not dare ignore the warning. I ordered the doors and windows secured and stationed 2 guards outside. After Pei Zhao fell asleep, a servant came with word that Qingheng's illness had suddenly worsened and that he wanted to see me. I planned to wait until Pei Zhao woke, but the young servant who brought the message was sweating with anxiety. I could only instruct Chunlan to stay beside the child without taking a single step away, then hurry toward the outer courtyard. I had barely left Zhaohua courtyard when I felt something was wrong. Qingheng had always been sensible. He would never send someone to rush me away while the Marquis's household was holding a banquet. I stopped the messenger. Who told you to come? He lowered his head. Someone from the clinic. Which person? The servant turned and ran. I immediately rushed back to Zhaohua courtyard. The 2 guards lay unconscious on the ground. Inside, the room was unnaturally quiet. Chunlan had collapsed beside the bed. A lump under the quilt made it look as if Pei Zhao were still sleeping. I tore the quilt back. Beneath it was only a cushion stuffed with clothes. Zhao! There was no answer. I ran out and shouted for help. The entire manor erupted into chaos. When Pei Yanchuan arrived, his face was completely drained of color. How long has he been missing? Less than a quarter of an hour. Cui Lingyi rushed in after him and pointed at me. She was the last person caring for Zhao, and she was also the one who found an excuse to leave. Who knows whether she arranged the kidnapping herself? Old Madame Cui said coldly, "Seize her first." Guards closed in. I did not resist. I only looked at Pei Yanchuan. My lord, do you suspect me too? He stared at me, his voice hard. Take Lu Jiwei to the western side courtyard. Without my order, no one is to approach her. My heart sank little by little. I knew finding Pei Zhao was the most important thing, but at the moment he ordered me detained in front of everyone, disappointment still washed over me. After all the time we had spent together, he still did not truly trust me. Huolin personally escorted me away. When we reached a covered corridor, he suddenly lowered his voice. Miss Lu, forgive the offense. With that, he slipped a map of the manor into my sleeve. The Marquis asked me to tell you that there is a traitor inside Zhaohua courtyard. If he did not remove you first, the person who truly acted would not reveal themselves. I stopped walking. Why didn't he tell me that directly? Huolin grimaced. My lord said there was no time to explain. I nearly laughed in exasperation. He was always like this. He thought that if he arranged everything properly, no one else needed to know anything. What has my lord found? Before the banquet, someone saw a vegetable delivery cart near the abandoned Buddhist hall. The Marquis isn't certain the young heir is there, but he has already sent people to investigate secretly. I unfolded the map. The abandoned Buddhist hall stood in the northwest corner of the estate, close to a narrow passage that had long been sealed off. If Pei Zhao had been awake when he was taken, he would have cried. Yet no one had heard him. That meant whoever took him had used some kind of sleeping incense or hidden him somewhere soundproof. I remembered his thought before his nap. There is a bad smell today. Go to the Buddhist hall. Huolin hesitated. My lord ordered you to remain somewhere safe. If he wants to know what Zhao Zhao saw while he was frightened, he has to take me with him. Huolin did not understand, but he still followed me toward the Buddhist hall. The place had been unused for years, and dust covered the doors. Pei Yanchuan was already standing in the courtyard. Several guards had searched the main hall. The moment he saw me, his brows drew sharply together. Who allowed you to come? If my lord needs me to find him, why lock me up? It is dangerous here. Zhao Zhao is in greater danger. I ignored him and bent to examine the ground. Footprints crossed the courtyard in every direction, clearly made on purpose to destroy the trail. In one corner, however, lay a tiny red wooden bead. It was a sleep-soothing bead I had personally strung at Pei Zhao's waist. He was here. I picked up the bead and walked toward the main hall. The closer I came to the back of the Buddha statue, the quieter my mind became. I heard none of Pei Zhao's thoughts. Normally, if he were within 10 paces, I should have been able to hear him, unless a thick stone wall stood between us. I circled behind the statue and noticed faint signs that its base had been moved. Pei Yanchuan ordered the guards to push the statue aside. Beneath it appeared a flight of stone steps descending into darkness. A very faint whimper came from below. Ah Wei, down here? He's underneath. I grabbed a lamp and rushed down. At the bottom was a hidden chamber. Pei Zhao had been tied to a wooden chair, a cloth stuffed in his mouth. His face was flushed, and he had cried until he had little strength left. I ran to untie him. He threw himself into my arms, trembling violently. Ah Wei, I'm here. I came. Pei Yanchuan crouched and reached to take him. When Pei Zhao saw his father, tears immediately flooded his eyes. Father. Pei Yanchuan pulled both of us into his arms. At that moment a mechanism suddenly turned overhead. Huolin shouted, "My lord, careful!" A heavy wooden beam dropped from above. He lunged forward and covered Pei Zhao and me with his own body. The beam struck his shoulder, he grunted, and his face instantly went pale. The guards lifted the beam away together. I steadied him. Are you all right? It's nothing. He could no longer raise his right arm. How can that be nothing? In one corner of the hidden chamber stood an old wooden chest. It contained no gold or silver, only medicinal account slips and a half-written letter. The letter had been written by Su Heng. She wrote that someone inside the Pei household had colluded with outside merchants to replace disaster relief medicine. She had once seen Qinghe County's medicinal register in old Madame Cui's Buddhist hall and had planned to hand the evidence to Pei Yanchuan. But shortly before giving birth, she was suddenly confined to her quarters. The letter ended after the words, "If anything happens to me." There was also a jade token bearing the Cui family's emblem inside the chest. When Pei Zhao saw the token, he suddenly screamed, "Bad, bad." He pointed to the token and then toward the part of the estate where old Madame Cui lived. Old Madame Cui arrived just in time to hear him. Her face went white for an instant before she recovered and said sorrowfully, "Zhao Zhao has been badly frightened." "How can you suspect an elder based on the words of a child?" Pei Yanchuan calmly picked up Pei Zhao. "When did I say I suspected mother?" Old Madame Cui stiffened. He continued, "Mother is so eager to explain herself that I am now curious where this jade token came from. Everything around us became so quiet you could have heard a needle drop. In the end, old Madame Cui only said the token might have been stolen by a servant. There was still no conclusive proof, so Pei Yanchuan could not immediately punish her, but the false piece of the Pei household had been completely torn apart. That night, I treated his shoulder injury. He sat beneath the lamp while I cut away the blood-stained cloth around the wound. The wooden beam had left a broad patch of purple bruising across his shoulder and back, and the skin had been scraped raw. If my lord had been one step slower, the beam might have struck your head. You and Zhao were underneath it. So my lord simply stopped caring about your own life? He looked at me. I will not let anything happen to either of you. My hands paused. When my lord ordered people to take me away today, I thought you didn't trust me. If I didn't trust you, I would never have told Huolin to take you to the western side courtyard. But you said nothing. There wasn't time. There is never time. My lord is accustomed to deciding things for other people, and then using "there wasn't time" to explain everything afterward. He fell silent. I tied off the bandage and prepared to stand. He suddenly caught my wrist. Lu Jiwei. Yes? When I saw Zhao was gone today, I was afraid for the first time. Later, when I heard you might have been taken too, I was even more afraid. His voice was very low. My heart gave a heavy thump. The lamplight flickered, softening the coldness in his eyes. He slowly leaned closer. I did not move away. A loud cry suddenly came from outside. Ah wei! We both snapped back to ourselves. I yanked my hand free, my cheeks heating. Pei Yanchuan closed his eyes as though forcing himself to endure something. A moment later, a matron carried Pei Zhao inside. He reached both hands toward me. Hold me. As soon as I took him, I heard his thought. Father wanted to secretly kiss Ah Wei. Zhao Zhao caught him. My face grew even hotter. Pei Yanchuan stared at his son as though for the first time he was seriously considering sending his own child straight back out of the room. After the young heir's kidnapping, he began a thorough investigation of the household. More than half the servants in Zhaohua courtyard were replaced. Every item of clothing and every medicinal ingredient had to pass inspection by both the manor physician and me. Old Madame Cui claimed illness and stopped leaving her residence. Cui Lingyi also returned to the Cui family. The manor looked peaceful again, but I knew the real danger had not passed. The account slips from the hidden chamber proved that medicine had been replaced, but they could not directly prove that old Madame Cui and Pei Chengli had participated. Su Heng's unfinished letter also stopped short of naming the full conspiracy. More troublesome still, Qinghe County's original disaster relief register had disappeared. If we could not find complete evidence, my father would remain in the official case file as the criminal who had embezzled disaster relief medicine. I began recopying every account slip from the hidden chamber. I recorded every quantity, date, and merchant house. Father used to teach me that an account book could be burned, but a transaction that had already happened would always leave traces somewhere else. If I could find shipping records, warehouse receipts, and correspondence between medicine merchants, I could reconstruct the entire chain of evidence. I did not expect old Madame Cui to move against me first. One morning, Pei Zhao began vomiting shortly after drinking his porridge. When the manor physician arrived, he found croton powder in it, which can cause abdominal pain. The maid who had delivered the porridge immediately accused me. Miss Liu personally gave me the powder and said the young heir had been suffering from indigestion, and that I should add a little to his porridge. Then the guards searched my room and found half a packet of croton powder. Everyone looked at me. Old Madame Cui entered supported by a matron, her face full of sorrow. Jiwei, I know you did not want to become a bedchamber maid, and I also know you have grievances against this household, but Zhao Zhao trusts you so deeply. How could you harm him? I stared at the medicine packet. The paper was the yellow paper normally used when Zhaohua courtyard collected medicine, and even the note on the seal imitated my handwriting. That is not mine. The maid burst into tears. It was Miss Liu who gave it to me. She said the young heir had been suffering from indigestion lately and told me to put a little medicinal powder in his porridge. When did I give it to you? Between 5 and 7 this morning. Where was I then? Chunlan was about to answer when a matron from old Madame Cui's side spoke first. The servants in Zhaohua courtyard were changing shifts at that hour. Who can prove Miss Liu remained in her room the entire time? Pei Yanchuan stood beside the bed, his face unreadable. I looked at him. My lord, do you believe me? He did not answer. Instead, he ordered me confined to a side courtyard until the matter was investigated. Again. The previous time, he had done it to lure the real culprit into exposing themselves. What about this time? I did not resist. I let the guards escort me away. The moment the door shut, I became strangely calm. Depending on someone else to say "I believe you" was meaningless if I wanted to clear my name. I needed evidence. The packet of croton powder looked like a convincing imitation, but it contained one flaw. Whenever I wrapped medicinal powder, I always folded the corners inward 3 times. Father had taught me that method because it helped keep the medicine dry. The packet found in my room had been folded only twice. The writing was not truly mine either. Someone had copied characters from my ordinary notes and traced them. The shapes looked similar, but the pressure of the strokes was different. More importantly, after Pei Zhao's kidnapping, I had already prepared for something like this. Every time Zhaohua courtyard collected medicine, I copied the record twice. One copy remained in my room, the other I entrusted to Huolin to deliver to Qingheng for safekeeping. I also weighed and recorded every medicinal ingredient that entered the courtyard. 2 days after I was confined, Pei Yanchuan came personally. In his hand was the duplicate ledger Qingheng had kept. You prepared for this long ago? Anyone in this household might be used as someone else's chess piece. I couldn't afford not to. Why didn't you tell me? I smiled. My lord never tells me about your arrangements either. For once, I left him with nothing to say. I pointed out the different folding method and the flaws in the copied handwriting. Then I asked for the Croton inventory to be checked. 2 taels of Croton were missing from the medicine storeroom. The steward who held the key was one of old Madame Kui's dowry servants. The maid who had accused me was also found to have suddenly received 50 taels of silver at home. The banknote came from a banking house owned by Pei Chengli. Confronted with the evidence, she finally admitted that someone had instructed her to frame me. Pei Chengli, however, had prepared for this in advance. He pushed one of his personal attendants forward to take the blame, claiming the man bore a grudge against me because I had once punished him. Old Madame Cui wept and insisted she knew nothing. Pei Yanchuan did not expose them on the spot. He only ordered everyone involved detained. I understood. He wanted to follow this thread to find evidence of the larger crime. But I was finally tired of living inside an endless web of schemes. After my innocence was established, he came to my room and placed a document on the table. Your indenture. You are free. I stared at that thin sheet of paper for a long time without touching it. My contract was for 5 years. I had served less than half a year. Why is my lord releasing me? All of this began because of the Pei household. You saved Zhao several times and helped me find the clues Ah Heng left behind. You earned this. He placed a property deed and a stack of banknotes beside it. There is a 2-courtyard residence in the west of the city. It is enough for you and Qingheng to live in. This silver will also support you comfortably for the rest of your life. I looked up at him. Does my lord want me to live in that house and continue caring for Zhao Zhao? You may enter the manor whenever you wish. In what capacity? Pei Yanchuan was silent for a moment. If you are willing, I will give you a proper status. What status? His brows tightened, as though he could not understand why I insisted on forcing an exact answer from him. Lu Jiwei, I will not mistreat you. The last little hope in my heart slowly went out. He still did not understand. My lord saved my younger brother, protected me, and is willing to investigate my father's case. I am deeply grateful. But I do not want to live in a house my lord gives me, spend silver my lord gives me, and wait for the day my lord decides what status I deserve. Nor do I want to remain in this household for the rest of my life as a nanny simply because Zhao Zhao cannot bear to part with me. Pei Yanchuan's voice deepened. You want to leave? What about Zhao? I will come back to see him. He will not agree. Then we will slowly teach him to accept it. Pei Yanchuan looked at me. Can you bear to leave him? Of course I could not. Pei Zhao was a beam of light I had encountered at the most hopeless point in my life. I had heard his grievances and watched him change from a child who could only cry and rage into someone who was slowly learning to speak and trust others. But being unwilling to leave him did not mean I should lose myself. My lord, I stayed because of my indenture and because Zhao Zhao needed me. But one day he will grow up and no longer need a nanny. When that day comes, who am I? Pei Yanchuan said. You can be a member of the Pei family. But before that, I should be Lu Jiwei. The room remained quiet for a long time. At last he did not try to persuade me again. Where do you intend to go? I will take Qingheng and open a medicinal food shop in the capital. I can. I don't want my lord to arrange it for me. His words stopped. This time, he did not become angry. He simply put away the property deed and the banknotes, leaving only my indenture on the table. When will you leave? Tomorrow. When Pei Zhao learned I was leaving, he cried until he could hardly breathe. He clung around my neck and refused to let go. Don't go. Ah, wait, don't go. My own tears nearly fell. Little Zhao, I'm not abandoning you. Liar. I will live in the capital. When you miss me, ask father to bring you to see me. He turned and glared at Pei Yanchuan. Bad father. Father didn't keep away. For once he did not scold him. He only said quietly, it is father's fault. I stared at him. It was the first time I had heard him admit fault on his own. After Pei Zhao exhausted himself crying, he fell asleep on my shoulder. I held him for a long time, before passing him to his father. My lord, don't always keep such a stern face. When he does something wrong you can teach him, but don't make him think every time he cries he is being unreasonable. I will remember. His medicinal meals cannot be too sweet. He is afraid of the dark at night, so leave a small lamp burning. He doesn't like unfamiliar people forcing him into their arms. I know. Every time I gave another instruction, Pei Yanchuan's voice grew a little hoarser. The next morning Qingheng and I left the manor. At the main gate, I looked back once. He stood on the long street holding Pei Zhao. He did not order anyone to stop me. He did not use the authority of a marquis to make another decision for me. The autumn wind lifted the hem of his robe. Pei Zhao lay against his shoulder, watching me through tear-filled eyes. I turned and stepped through the gates. At that moment I carried no indenture and no gold or silver from the Pei household. Yet for the first time I felt that my path truly belonged to me. 3 days later I rented a small shop in the south of the city. It was not large, but there was enough space to live in the back courtyard. Qingheng and I scrubbed the doors and windows clean and hung a wooden sign outside, Jiwei Medicinal Kitchen. On the day we opened, my first customer was not Pei Yanchuan. It was an elderly man with a limp who had traveled from Qinghai County. He placed an oilcloth bundle in front of me. Miss Liu, this is something your father entrusted to me before he died. Inside was half of an old account book stained dark with blood. The old man looked at me and said slowly, word by word, your father said the register that can truly clear his name is not in the county magistrate's office. It is in the Marquis of Zhenbei's residence. The elderly man's name was Uncle Zhou. He had once worked in father's medicine shop. Before father was taken away, he hid half of the account book inside his medicine cart and told Uncle Zhou to carry it out of Qinghai County. But Uncle Zhou was pursued on the road, fell and broke one leg, and could only hide in the countryside. He had not dared come find me until he heard that I had opened a medicinal food shop in the capital. The account book recorded the real quantities of the disaster relief medicines from the 15th year of Yangning. The astragalus, atractylodes, poria, and other ingredients father actually received were 70% less than the quantities recorded in the official accounts. The missing portion had been replaced with poor-quality old medicine. The trading house responsible for transport was called Xinghe Company. The true owner behind Xinghe Company was Pei Chengli. Your father discovered it and wanted to report it, Uncle Zhou said with red eyes. But the county magistrate arrested him first. The magistrate accused the Liu family of switching the medicine, and all the accounts were altered. Then what is the register in the Pei household? Every time Xing Company shipped goods, it had to submit a master record to the real patron behind it. Your father heard that the master record was sent into the Marquis of Zhenbei's residence. Old Madame Cui's maiden family traded in medicinal herbs, and Pei Chengli is the manor's second young master. At last all the clues connected. I copied the account book 3 times. One copy I gave to the trustworthy Duchess of Angguo. One I hid under a floor tile in my shop. The third I kept with me. I did not immediately go to Pei Yanchuan. Only after leaving his household had I truly understood that I could not spend my life waiting for him to solve every problem for me. Business was poor when the shop first opened. Some people distrusted me because I was a young woman and could not believe I understood medicine. Others heard I had once been a nanny in the Marquis's household and came only to pry into the Pei family's private affairs. I ignored all of it. I simply assessed each customer's condition carefully and adjusted their medicinal food formulas. The Duchess of Angguo's young grandson ate a digestive tonic paste I prepared, and his appetite gradually improved. The Duchess personally introduced me to several households. In less than a month, the shop had a steady group of customers. Qingheng also entered the academy in the south of the city. He attended lessons during the day and helped me with the accounts at night. We were busy, but we felt more secure than at any point in our lives before. Pei Yanchuan came on the 7th day after the shop opened. He was not dressed in formal marquis robes, only an ordinary dark outfit, with Pei Zhao in his arms. The instant Pei Zhao saw me, he wriggled down and ran toward me on his short legs. Away! I crouched and caught him. Away didn't disappear. Away smells nice. My eyes grew warm. Pei Yanchuan stood in the doorway holding a food box. Zhao refuses to eat. I looked inside. It contained several delicate pastries, none suitable for Pei Zhao's weak digestion. He isn't refusing to eat. These are too rich and sweet. The cook followed the recipes you left behind. I tasted one. He used 3 times too much sugar. Pei Zhao nodded vigorously. Sweet, new cook at home can't make it. Pei Yanchuan remained expressionless. "That is why we came to find you." I suspected he had simply found himself an excuse to visit, but I did not expose him. I made a bowl of Yemen shredded chicken congee. Pei Zhao ate more than half of it, then nestled in my arms and played with his wooden horse. He sat quietly in a corner, looking completely out of place in my little shop. I asked, "Isn't my lord going back?" "I will wait until Zhao finishes eating." "He already finished." "Then I will wait until he finishes playing. He can play all afternoon." "Then I will wait until afternoon." I had nothing to say to that. From then on, Pei Yanchuan brought Pei Zhao every 2 or 3 days. Sometimes he said the child would not eat. Sometimes he said the child had slept badly. Once he even claimed Pei Zhao wanted to see the cat at the medicinal food shop. I
Thank
asked
you for
Pei Zhao,
supporting
"Since
Panda.
when is
If
there
you
a cat
enjoyed
in
the
my
story,
shop?"
don't
Pei Zhao
forget to
blinked.
like, comment,
"Father
and
said there
subscribe.
is. Your
I looked up
support
at
helps
him.
us bring you
He
more
said
amazing
with a
stories."
perfectly straight
Now,
face.
let's begin
Perhaps
story
it ran
2.
away.
That same afternoon he ordered Wo Lin to bring over a snow-white kitten. When Wo Lin handed it to me, he looked utterly exhausted. My lord had me search half the capital. He said it had to be gentle, not shed too much, not scratch children, and also be good-looking. Pei Yanchuan gave him a cold glance. Wo Lin immediately shut his mouth. He no longer sent me expensive jewelry, nor did he propose buying me houses or shops. When my roof leaked, he brought men to repair it. When I said I could hire craftsmen, he asked, "Which craftsman do you want to hire?" When someone came to make trouble, he did not immediately order the person arrested. Instead, he first asked me, "Do you need me to stay?" If I said no, he truly stepped aside. He was beginning to learn how to ask instead of command. And I was beginning to see the change in him. Rumors, however, spread. Some people said I was the Marquis's hidden mistress, kept outside the household. Others said I had deliberately left the manor to raise my price and force Pei Yanchuan to marry me with the formal rights due to a lawful wife. At gatherings of noble young women, Cui Lingyi hinted that I had seduced my master while serving as his child's nanny. After those rumors reached the shop, more than half my customers stopped coming. Qingheng was so angry he wanted to confront people in the street. I stopped him. People will say what they want. Going from house to house explaining will do no good. But they're slandering you, sister. Then let facts speak. I posted a notice outside the shop, declaring that the source of every medicinal ingredient and every coin of income from the business could be examined. I also stated clearly that the only connection between me and the Marquis of Zhenbei's household was my former care of the young heir, and that the Pei household did not support my shop. When Pei Yanchuan learned about it, he did not immediately announce that he intended to marry me. Instead, while reporting on northern military affairs at court, he clarified the matter in front of several nobles. Miss Liu has already been removed from the servant registry. The medicinal food shop is operated independently by her and has no connection to the Pei family's property. She once saved my son and also saved the young grandson of the Duke of Angguo. If anyone slanders her because she was once a servant, I will ask the capital prefecture to investigate according to law. Someone tentatively asked whether he intended to take me into the manor as a concubine. Pei Yanchuan replied, "She is no man's concubine, and she does not need to depend on anyone in order to stand on her own." When those words reached me, I stood with the medicine scale in my hand for a long time without moving. He finally understood. Protecting me did not mean rushing to turn me into his woman. It meant acknowledging that I already had the right and ability to stand independently. After winter arrived, several settlements outside the capital that housed refugees suddenly reported large numbers of children suffering diarrhea and high fever. The authorities invited several physicians, but none could identify the cause. Knowing that I was skilled in children's dietary care, the Duchess of Angguo asked me to go with her. The moment I saw the medicine being distributed in the refugee village, my heart sank. The astragalus was dull gray, with blackened cross-sections, clearly stored for many years. The atractalodes had also been mixed with large quantities of inferior material. It was exactly the same substitution method recorded in father's account book. More alarming still, the mark on the medicine packets was still Xinga Company. I immediately ordered the medicine stopped. We used rice water, salt water, and a few mild herbs to ease the children's symptoms instead. When Pei Yanchuan received the news, he hurried there overnight. He did not question my judgment. He simply ordered Wo Lin to seal all the medicine and trace its source. Following Xinga Company's transport records, we found a warehouse on the outskirts of the capital. The warehouse was filled with high-grade medicinal herbs that should have been distributed to disaster victims. Pei Chengli had been selling the good medicine at high prices to merchants from other regions, then using stale inferior herbs to make up the official quantities and pocketing the difference. After the warehouse manager was arrested, he confessed that all the account books were hidden in old Madame Cui's private storeroom, inside the Pei residence. Pei Yanchuan immediately sealed the manor, but by the time we returned, the private storeroom was already on fire. Flames climbed into the sky. Old Madame Cui stood outside the courtyard, crying that the winter air was dry and the blaze had started by accident. Pei Chengli also used the chaos to prepare an escape from the capital. Cui Lingyi, meanwhile, secretly slipped into Zhaohua courtyard and tried to take Pei Zhao. She believed that as long as she held the young heir, Pei Yanchuan would not dare continue investigating the Cui family, but I had already anticipated that they might destroy the evidence. The account books in the private storeroom were not our only proof. I compared father's old ledger with Xingye Company's shipping slips, the warehouses receiving records, and the batch markings on the medicine packets from the refugee settlements. I compiled a complete list. For every shipment, there was a corresponding trace showing where it had come from, how much was missing, and what had been substituted. Burning the private storeroom could only prove their guilty conscience. It could not erase transactions that had already taken place. I was hurrying toward Zhaohua courtyard when Cui Lingyi tried to take Pei Zhao away. She held a dagger against the child. There was none of her former gentleness left in her face. "Don't come closer." Pei Zhao was pale with fear. "Ah, Wei. Zhao Zhao won't cry. If Zhao Zhao cries, the bad person will get angry." My heart ached, but I could only stop. "Miss Cui, what do you want? Make Pei Yanchuan spare my aunt and my cousin and let them leave the capital. The Marquis will never agree. Then his son can die with me." The dagger in her hand trembled. She clearly did not truly want to die. I deliberately lowered my voice. "From childhood, the Cui family taught you that only by marrying the Marquis of Zhenbei could you prove your worth. But if old Madame Cui truly loved you, why would she send you to do something this dangerous?" Her eyes wavered. "Shut up." Pei Chengli was already preparing to escape alone. "Did he ever plan to take you with him?" "You're lying. The permit to leave the city at your waist was given to you by him, wasn't it? Why don't you look at the date on it?" She instinctively glanced down. I seized the moment and flung the medicinal powder in my hand into her eyes. Cui Lingyi screamed. I lunged forward and pulled Pei Zhao into my arms, but the dagger sliced across my arm, leaving a bleeding cut. At the same time, Huolin charged in with the guards and forced Cui Lingyi to the ground. Pei Yanchuan arrived immediately afterward. The moment he saw the blood on my arm, his expression changed. "Where are you hurt?" "Only my arm, I'm fine. Look at Zhao Zhao first." He caught my wrist. "The child has Huolin." His voice was tight. "This time, I'm checking on you first." Pei Zhao stood nearby with tears in his eyes. "Father is finally a little smarter." My tears suddenly fell. Not because of the pain. Because at last I was certain that the man in front of me was truly changing. Pei Chengli was captured that very night. With the evidence now conclusive, he could no longer shift the blame. Old Madame Cui was stripped of authority over the household and confined to the Buddhist hall to await the court's judgment. After everything settled, Pei Yanchuan came to my medicinal food shop. He did not bring Pei Zhao. He did not bring guards. Zhuwei. It was the first time he had called my name directly without a command or a test hidden behind it. In the past, I always believed that if I stood in front of you and removed every danger, that was enough to protect you. Later, I understood that what you wanted was not a wall. He looked at me. You wanted someone willing to trust you and willing to walk beside you. My nose stung. "Doesn't my lord think it's a little late to understand that now?" "It is late," he admitted without excuse. "So I do not dare ask you to forgive me immediately." "Then why did my lord come today?" "To ask you something." "What? Will you let me keep waiting?" I looked at him. This man, who had once known only how to issue orders, had finally placed the choice in my hands. Slowly I reached out and took his fingers. "You may wait." His eyes lit at once. I added, "But I haven't agreed to marry you." "I know." His hand closed around mine carefully. "I will wait until you are willing." After Pei Chengli was sent to the Court of Judicial Review, Xingye Company's manager and the officials involved were arrested one after another. The Qinghe County case was reopened. The county magistrate confessed that he had accepted silver, altered the medicinal registers, and placed every charge on my father. 3 years after father had been falsely condemned, his name was finally cleared. The court ordered the return of the Liu family's confiscated house and property, and posthumously commended father as a righteous merchant. A public medicinal dispensary was also established in Qinghe County. I took Qingheng back to our hometown once. The old sign over the Liu family's medicine shop was already ruined, and weeds filled the courtyard. Qingheng stood at the gate and cried for a long time. I did not cry. I buried the half-account book father had left behind in front of mother's grave and said quietly, "Father, mother, Your daughter did not let the Liu family carry that disgrace forever. Qingheng has grown up too. From now on, we will live well. After we returned to the capital, Jiwei Medicinal Kitchen reopened. Because of what had happened in the refugee settlements, the shop had become widely known. Many people urged me to expand immediately, but I was in no hurry to make more silver. Instead, I cleared a room in the back courtyard and turned it into a small clinic. Every month I set aside part of the shop's profit to provide free consultations and medicinal meals for poor women and young children. The Duchess of Anguo volunteered a donation. Several physicians who had previously received help also agreed to come and see patients there regularly. Half a year later, the small clinic became Jiwei Charity Hall. I was no longer merely the nanny in the Marquis's household who knew how to soothe a child. Nor was I merely the daughter defined by my father's wrongful conviction. At last, I had built something that truly belonged to me. Pei Yanchuan still brought Pei Zhao every few days. Sometimes he helped move medicinal supplies, sometimes he delivered ledgers for me. Although he had learned to ask before acting, he was still terrible at ordinary household work. The first time he tried to cook a medicinal dish for me, he mistook salt for sugar. Pei Zhao took one bite, and his whole little face wrinkled up. Father's cooking is scarier than father's battles. I burst out laughing. Pei Yanchuan tasted it himself, then expressionlessly poured out the entire pot. Next time will be better. My lord still wants a next time? Why not? The women in the kitchen are already saying they'll all take leave if you come in again. He looked toward Huo Lin, who was struggling not to laugh. Huo Lin immediately straightened his back. I heard nothing. Before Pei Zhao's third birthday, an imperial decree formally announced the punishments for the Cui family's crimes. Old Madame Cui had participated in the embezzlement and substitution of disaster relief medicine, and had tolerated plots that endangered the young heir. Because of her age, and because the court found she had not personally carried out the attacks, her life was spared. She was stripped of her court-bestowed title and sent to the family temple, forbidden to leave for the rest of her life. Pei Chengli was struck from the clan register and exiled 3,000 li away. Cui Lingyi, for taking the young heir hostage, was sent back to the Cui clan under permanent supervision and forbidden ever to enter the capital again. The shadow that had hung over the Pei household for years finally dispersed. That evening, Pei Yanchuan came to the medicinal food shop with Pei Zhao and Qingheng. Huo Lin followed with men carrying 3 wooden chests. I looked at him. What is my lord giving me this time? Not betrothal gifts. He opened the first chest. Inside were the deeds to the Liu family's old residence and medicine shop. The court restored the Liu family's property. The Qinghai County authorities sent these documents to the capital yesterday. The second chest contained property deeds for Jiwei Medicinal Kitchen and Jiwei Charity Hall. The shop property had originally been rented. Now the deed bore my name. I frowned. My lord bought it? No. The Duchess of Anguo and several people who received help from the charity hall contributed the money together as a gift of thanks. I only handled the legal documents for you. The third chest contained an inventory of a woman's private property. This is part of the dowry Ah Heng left behind before her death. I immediately said, I cannot take it. It is not being given to you. Pei Yanchuan looked at Pei Zhao. Ah Heng left instructions that if someone truly protected Zhao in the future, part of this property could be used for the expenses of raising him while he was young. You helped uncover the truth behind her death and saved him several times. This money should be transferred to the charity hall to help more children. My eyes stung. Not one of those 3 things came with marriage as a condition. Pei Yanchuan returned everything that rightfully belonged to me first. Only then did he take a marriage document from his sleeve. This time, he did not place it directly in front of me. He simply said, I want to marry you. Pei Zhao immediately poked his head out from the side. Mother, I froze. He covered his mouth, his eyes darting around mischievously. Qingheng said I couldn't call you that yet, but Zhao Zhao couldn't help it. The tips of Pei Yanchuan's ears turned faintly red. Qingheng, however, stepped directly in front of me. My lord, I have questions. Pei Yanchuan became solemn. Ask. If sister marries into the Pei household, can she still run the medicinal food shop and the charity hall? Yes. Will the household force her to spend every day managing the inner residence and serving people she doesn't like? No. Whether she wants to manage the inner household will be her decision. What if people dislike her because she was once a servant? I will make sure they do not dare speak that way in front of her. Qingheng frowned. Sister can make them shut their mouths herself. She doesn't need my lord to do it. Pei Yanchuan paused. Then I will stand beside her and watch while she makes them shut their mouths. Qingheng looked barely satisfied. Holding back a smile, I asked, anything else? He thought for a moment. If my lord and sister have children together someday, will you treat Zhao Zhao differently, or will you favor Zhao Zhao and mistreat sister's children? Pei Yanchuan looked at Pei Zhao. Zhao is my son, and he is also the responsibility Heng left to me. If there are other children in the future, every child should receive the same love. The position of heir to the Pei household will not be changed casually because of anyone's selfish wishes. I will not allow children to become tools for competing for affection. His answer was not only for Qingheng, it was also for me. I looked at the marriage document in his hand. My lord, what if I am unwilling to marry you? Pei Zhao nervously twisted the corner of his clothes. Pei Yanchuan was silent for a moment. Then I will keep waiting. Until when? Not until you give in out of pity, and not until gossip pressures you into it. He spoke each word clearly. Until you truly want to. I remembered the first day I met him. He had stood at the entrance to Zhaohua courtyard, and coldly demanded to know what I had done to Pei Zhao. Back then, he had been suspicious and forceful, trusting only what he could control himself. Now at last, he had learned to place the right to decide in another person's hands. I took the marriage document from him. Then you don't need to wait any longer. Pei Zhao cheered first. Mother! He threw himself into my arms, smiling as happily as he had the first time I scratched his itchy back. Pei Yanchuan remained standing where he was, as if he had not yet understood what had happened. I looked up at him. My lord isn't happy? He suddenly reached out and embraced Pei Zhao and me together. I am happy. His voice was slightly hoarse. I simply did not expect you would truly agree. Our wedding was set for early spring. It was not so extravagant that the entire capital took notice, but not a single proper rite was reduced because of my origins. Pei Yanchuan welcomed me into the household with all the formal rights due to his lawful wife. My name was entered in full rather than reduced to merely Lady Lu, and no one deliberately concealed the fact that I had once been a servant. The day before the wedding, he brought out my old indenture. The paper had yellowed slightly, and the red fingerprint I had pressed onto it back then was still visible. He asked, "How do you want to dispose of it?" I lit a candle and burned the indenture to ash. Pei Zhao crouched beside the brazier and watched the ashes fall with great seriousness. Mother isn't sold anymore. I stroked his head. That's right. Mother will never be sold again. Pei Yanchuan buried the ashes in the courtyard and planted a crabapple tree over them with his own hands. From now on, whenever it flowers, it will remind me of one thing. What thing? You were not bought by me, and you were not left behind by the Pei household. He took my hand. You chose to come back yourself. After our marriage, I did not give up Jiwei Medicinal Kitchen or the charity hall. Every morning, I still went to the shop to review the accounts and adjust dietary formulas. Whenever Pei Yanchuan was in the capital, he came to pick me up himself in the evening. Outside the household, he was still the cold-faced Marquis of Lingyang. Officials did not dare raise their voices before him, and military commanders treated him with deep respect. But once he returned home, he had to build wooden blocks with Pei Zhao, taste the new medicinal dishes I prepared, and listen to Qingheng talk about the trivial events at his academy. Once, Pei Zhao spilled the ink and covered his entire little face in black. Pei Yanchuan had just drawn his brows together when the child secretly glanced at me. Father is turning into the stone lion again. I coughed once. He was silent for a moment, then forcibly changed the reprimand already on his tongue into, "Be more careful next time." Pei Zhao immediately nodded. Zhao Zhao knows. Then he ran away. I laughed so hard I had to lean over the table. He looked helpless. What exactly are you laughing at? At how much my lord has improved. Only because I didn't scold him? In the past, my lord only knew how to command. Now at least you listen to the child first. He walked toward me. Then do I receive a reward? What reward does my lord want? He leaned closer. I immediately raised a hand to block his face. It's daytime. Zhao Zhao can come in at any moment. I already had Huolin watch him. The words had barely left his mouth when Pei Zhao's voice came from outside. Mother. Pei Yanchuan closed his eyes. The door opened, and Pei Zhao ran in, holding the white kitten. When he saw his father standing so close to me, he immediately covered his eyes, though 2 large gaps remained between his fingers. Father tried to secretly kiss mother again. Father is embarrassed. I pushed Pei Yanchuan away, my shoulders shaking with laughter. On Pei Zhao's 3rd birthday, the manor held a small banquet. He could now speak many sentences clearly, and had begun learning characters with a tutor. I realized that I was hearing his thoughts less and less often. Mother had once told me that the better children became at expressing what was in their hearts, the harder it became for someone like me to hear them. It was not a loss. It meant they no longer needed someone else to speak for them. After the birthday banquet, Pei Zhao sat beneath the crabapple tree opening his gifts. Pei Yanchuan placed a small jade crown on his head. I stood under the covered veranda and watched them. Pei Zhao suddenly looked up. That familiar childish voice entered my heart one more time. Mother is smiling. Father finally didn't make mother angry enough to run away. Zhao Zhao won't need to speak in his heart anymore. My eyes grew hot. The next instant, he jumped down from Pei Yanchuan's arms and ran toward me. Mother. This time, he did not call me only in his heart. His voice was clear and bright. I crouched and gathered him into my arms. Pei Yanchuan slowly walked over and brushed a crabapple petal from my shoulder. Jiwei. Yes? We're home. I looked up at him. Warm spring sunlight filtered through the blooming crabapple branches and fell across him and Pei Zhao. I had once believed that simply surviving would be the greatest wish of my life. Later I understood that living was not merely finding a roof over one's head or a bowl of food to fill one's stomach. A true life meant having the right to choose whether to stay or leave, having the courage not to be defined by one's status, and having someone willing to respect me, wait for me, and walk beside me. I took Pei Yanchuan's hand and carried Pei Zhao toward the warmly lit rooms. This time there was no indenture, there was no command, there was no one else deciding my future for me. I chose to come home. And I chose the rest of my life for myself. Thank you for supporting Panda. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more amazing stories. Now, let's begin story 2. I am the second wife of the Marquis of Lingyang, and everyone says I have a vicious heart. They're right. I married into this household intending to play the role of a wicked stepmother. I was absolutely going to ruin that irritating boy so that one day, my own son could inherit the title without resistance. But why was the boy nothing like I had imagined? I gave him plain food, and he said, "Thank you, mother, for teaching me to live frugally." When his monthly allowance was skimmed off, he went out to the street and earned money by writing letters for people, then saved it to buy me a hairpin. I wanted to send him to the military camp to suffer a little. Instead, he returned with military achievements to his name, and later he even took first place in the palace examination. The first thing he did was kneel before me and present an imperial edict. "Mother, I secured an honorary court title for you." My own son bounced impatiently beside him. "Brother, that was supposed to be my job. My name is Lin Zhaoning, and I am the second wife of Shen Huaiyan, the Marquis of Lingyang." Calling me his second wife sounds respectable. Put less politely, I was simply a replacement wife. Shen Huaiyan's first wife died of illness 3 years ago, leaving behind a 5-year-old son named Shen Yanqing. Shen Huaiyan spends most of the year guarding the frontier, so the child remained at the Marquis Manor in the capital under the care of several wet nurses. Before I married, my mother held my hand and warned me over and over again. "Zhaoning, don't be foolish. Treat the child left by the first wife as if he doesn't exist. Your own son will be the true legitimate heir. The title of the Marquis household must belong to him. If you can't bring yourself to deal with the boy directly, then raise him into uselessness. Don't teach him books, don't teach him rules, cut back his food, clothing, and spending. Once he becomes a good-for-nothing, he naturally won't be able to compete with your son." I in vigor stand, and I truly believed I did. I, Lin Zhaoning, came from a military family and grew up on the frontier. I was skilled at riding and archery and decisive in everything I did. Ruining one child should have been child's play. Inside the bridal sedan, I had already worked out my plan. First, I would give the boy a harsh lesson so he would know who the mistress of the household was. Then I would begin with his food, clothing, and daily expenses, slowly wearing down his will. Once he became useless, my future son would inherit the title without trouble. The thought even made me laugh. "Chengxing," my dowry maid spoke softly. "Young lady, what are you laughing about?" I immediately composed my face. "Nothing. The wind is strong, some dust got in my eyes." The Zhenbei Marquis Manor stood in the eastern part of the capital and consisted of 3 courtyards. The moment I stepped down from the sedan, the servants lined up in 2 rows to welcome me. At their head was Nanny Chu, an old retainer of the household. She bowed. "Madam, his lordship is still at the frontier. He sent a letter saying that you should settle in first. He will return in a few days." I nodded. Nanny Chu then gestured behind the crowd. "This is the eldest young Master Yan." I followed her gesture and stopped short. Behind everyone stood a child so thin he looked like a dry twig. His clothes hung loosely from him as though draped over a rack. There was hardly any flesh on his face, and his pointed chin made his eyes look unnaturally large. Those eyes held fear, curiosity, and the wary caution of a little animal that had been abandoned. He was plainly terrified, yet he could not stop himself from looking at the newcomer, as though trying to judge whether I would truly become the person in charge of him. I had expected a spoiled young master indulged by his birth mother, arrogant, overbearing, perhaps even rude. I had prepared a whole speech to put him in his place. Instead, he stood there timidly, as if the whole world might abandon him at any moment. Suddenly I couldn't bring myself to deliver the intimidating lecture I had prepared. But I was here to be a wicked stepmother. I could not go soft. Yanner, why aren't you greeting your mother? The boy froze, stole a glance at me and lowered his head. Mother. His voice was no louder than a mosquito's buzz, as though speaking any louder might earn him a beating. My heart gave a small jolt. I was accustomed to flashing blades and had met every kind of fierce character. But I had never dealt with a child who shrank in on himself, ready to be hit before anyone had even scolded him. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, Lin Zhoning, you came here to be a wicked stepmother. All right, everyone may leave. Chunxing, bring in my dowry. Nanny Chu, show me to the main rooms. I turned and walked away. After several steps, Chunxing leaned close to my ear. Young lady, the eldest young master looks so pitiful. Quiet. What's pitiful about him? He's my future competitor. That was what I said. Yet that night, I tossed and turned because of those eyes. Nanny Chu had reported that after Shen Yanqing's birth mother died, Shen Huayan was away for most of every year. The wet nurses were outwardly respectful but lazy behind the scenes, and they had skimmed a great deal from his food and clothing allowances. Yanqing was already 5, yet he was noticeably shorter than other children his age and thin as a little monkey. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. In the middle of the night, I sat up and called Chunxing. Go to the kitchen and see what they gave young Master Yan for dinner. About 15 minutes later, she came back looking grim. Plain rice porridge and pickled vegetables. Plain porridge and pickles? He was 5 years old and still growing, and that was what they fed him? Chunxing carefully reminded me, young lady, didn't you say you wanted to raise him into uselessness? I choked on my own words. Yes, I wanted to ruin him, but plain porridge and pickles were too meager even for that. If my stepson lived like this, what would people say when they found out? Starting tomorrow, young Master Yan's meals will be exactly the same as mine. Whatever I eat, he eats. Chunxing's eyes widened. I immediately found an excuse. I'm doing it for appearances. If everyone says I abused the child of the first wife, what will become of my reputation? When I lay down again, I still saw those eyes in my mind. One voice inside me said, stay clear-headed. You came here to be a wicked stepmother. Another voice said, but he really is pitiful. The two argued until nearly dawn. The next morning, while Chunxing combed my hair, she asked, what will we say if your mother finds out? I rolled my eyes. Tell her I'm only putting on a show for the servants so there won't be gossip. When I reached the dining room, Shen Yanqing was already seated. He still wore the same faded blue robe, its cuffs frayed and fuzzy with wear. In front of him stood a bowl of plain porridge and a plate of pickled vegetables. At the sight of me, he immediately stood. Mother. I signaled for Chunxing to bring in my breakfast. Bird's nest congee, osmanthus cakes, shrimp dumplings, braised beef and wontons in chicken broth. Shen Yanqing glanced at the food only once before lowering his head and continuing to sip his porridge. That single glance tightened something in my chest. Chunxing, give all of it to him. All of it? All of it. I took the boy's bowl of plain porridge in exchange and took a sip. It was as tasteless as water. From now on you'll eat with me. Whatever I eat, you eat. Shen Yanqing looked at me, his eyes turning red. I immediately hardened my expression. No crying, you're a boy. What are you crying for? He fought the tears back. Thank you, mother. Then he carefully picked up a shrimp dumpling and ate it in tiny bites, as though afraid it would disappear if he ate too quickly. Watching him, I understood even less how he had been living before I arrived. After breakfast, I summoned Nanny Chu, who was responsible for young Master Yan's food, clothing, and expenses before now. Her expression shifted. I was, madam, the legitimate eldest son of the Zhenbei Marquis household, eats plain porridge and pickles every day, and wears robes with frayed cuffs. If word gets out, people will say, his lordship is heartless and the Lin family is ungrateful. His lordship risks his life at the frontier, while the household at home cannot even properly care for one child. How am I supposed to hold my head up? Nanny Chu knelt to admit fault. I did not pursue the matter further. I only ordered that from then on, all of young Master Yan's expenses were to meet the standard proper for a young master of the Marquis household. If anything was lacking, it was to be reported to me and supplied from the storerooms. After Nanny Chu withdrew, Chunxing asked again, didn't you want to ruin him? I answered solemnly. Ruining someone doesn't have to start with his food and clothing. If he can't even eat his fill, what happens to my reputation? I want to ruin him without anyone noticing, not have the whole world gossip about me. Chunxing immediately praised me. Young lady, how wise. I gave a dignified hum, though I felt a little guilty inside. I had clearly decided to be a wicked stepmother. Why did every plan fall apart the moment I looked at that boy? It had to be because his eyes reminded me of little abandoned animals I had seen on the frontier. The moment I saw one, I wanted to feed it. That was all. I was the daughter of a military family. My heart was made of iron. That afternoon, I practiced swordsmanship in the courtyard. I had done so since childhood. If I went even a day without practice, my whole body felt wrong. When I sheathed my sword, I noticed a small head peeking from behind the gate. It was Shen Yanqing. His eyes shone as he stared at the sword in my hand. I pretended not to see him. He watched a little longer, then started to sneak away. Young Master Yan. His whole body stiffened. He slowly stepped out. Mother, come here, do you want to look? He nodded, then shook his head. When I asked again, he finally murmured, I do. I handed him the sword. The sword was more than half his height, but his eyes lit up with astonishing intensity. Do you like swords that much? Yes. Why? Father uses a sword. I once saw father practicing. He looked very impressive. Whenever he mentioned his father, his voice carried a careful kind of longing. Shen Huayan was at the frontier most of the year. The boy probably saw him only a few times annually, if that. Do you want to learn? His head snapped up. See, can I? Why not? Your father is an expert swordsman. You're his son. Learning the sword is only natural. He nodded hard, his voice catching. I want to learn, mother, I want to learn. If you want to learn, then learn properly. Starting tomorrow, practice with me for 1 hour every afternoon. He froze. You'll teach me, mother? What? You think I'm not good enough? He shook his head furiously. No, I don't mean that. I grew up on the frontier. My riding and archery are among the best. Your father might not even beat me. Thank you, mother, thank you. I waved him away. After running several steps, he turned back and smiled. It was the first time I had seen that smile. 2 shallow dimples appeared in his thin cheeks, and his eyes curved like crescents, as though something inside him had just been lit. I stood there looking at him for a long time. Chunxing poked her head out. Young lady, does teaching him swordsmanship count as ruining him? Quiet. Yes, young lady. In the days that followed, I kept going back and forth between 2 mindsets. In the morning, I told myself I had to be a little crueler to him. At noon, I saw how thin he was and put an extra chicken leg in his bowl. At night, I resolved to be harsher the next day. The following morning, I had new clothes made for him because his old ones were nearly worn through. At last, Chunxing could no longer hold back. Young lady, have you forgotten what madam told you? At the time, I was sewing a knee guard for Shen Yanqing because winter was coming and sword practice could easily leave him injured. I haven't forgotten. Then what is that? Knee protection. I can't let him get hurt practicing. How would I explain it when his lordship comes home? Chunxing's eyes plainly said, your excuses are getting more ridiculous by the day. Once I finished, I took the knee guard to the eastern rooms. Shen Yanqing sat under the eaves, reading a battered copy of the 1,000-character classic, its page edges all curled. Where are your old books? Nanny said they were too old, so she threw them away. I drew in a slow breath. Those books might very well have been left to him by his birth mother. Tomorrow I'll have someone take you to a bookshop. Buy whatever you want. No need, mother. This one is still good. If I say you're buying books, you're buying books. I shoved the knee guard into his hands. The boy turned it over and over. His eyes reddened. No crying. Did you make this yourself, mother? Yes. I cleared my throat. I just threw it together. Don't complain if it's ugly. It's beautiful. He hugged it to his chest as though it were treasure. Thank you, mother. Suddenly, I could not bear those 2 words anymore. A pastry earned a thank you. A new set of clothes earned a thank you. A knee guard earned a thank you. It was as if he had received so little kindness in his life that every tiny bit had to be thanked for with solemn care. I stood abruptly, went straight back to the main courtyard, closed the door and leaned against it. Chunxing knocked from outside. Young lady, what's wrong? I took a deep breath. Chunxing, I think something is wrong with me. I don't want to ruin him anymore. Silence fell outside for a moment before she answered, young lady, to be honest, I noticed that a long time ago. Get lost. Yes, young lady. That night, I even dreamed that my mother stood with her hands on her hips and scolded me. Lin Zhaoning, have you lost your mind? I told you to ruin him, and instead you're making him clothes, buying him books, and teaching him the sword. Are you being a stepmother or his birth mother? In the dream, I swore with great conviction that I would definitely start ruining him the next day. Then the scene changed. Thin little Shen Yanqing stood in front of me, lifted his bright eyes, and called, Mother, and I failed all over again. When I woke, I was determined to be at least a little cruel. I got dressed and strode outside with fierce determination. The moment I opened the door, however, Shen Yanqing stood there clutching the knee guard and smiling brilliantly. Mother, can we practice swordsmanship today? I was silent for a moment. Forget it, we'll talk after breakfast. In the blink of an eye, the 12th lunar month arrived and the capital saw its first snowfall. Shen Yanqing had practiced the sword with me for 3 months, and he was in much better spirits. He rose before dawn to read, practiced swordsmanship in the afternoon, and reviewed his lessons at night. Nanny Chu had supplied him with proper clothing for all 4 seasons, and his meals had improved. At last there was a little flesh on his face. That afternoon, I practiced in the courtyard while Yanqing followed beside me. He could already complete several basic sword routines. I tapped his wrist lightly with my scabbard. Your wrist needs to be firmer. Don't hesitate when you strike. The sword is an extension of your arm. Wherever you want it to go, it must go. He repeated the movement. This time it was better. Very good. Take a break. Instead of resting, he took something from inside his robe and offered it to me with both hands. Mother, this is for you. It was a very ordinary silver hairpin. A plum blossom was carved at the top. The workmanship was not exquisite, but it was simple and elegant. Where did you get this? I saved my monthly allowance and bought it. Something immediately felt wrong. I sent Chunxing to ask around and learned that the eldest young master's monthly allowance was 2 taels of silver. Nanny Zhang, who had managed his affairs before, had been skimming it. In reality, he received less than 1 tael each month. How much did this hairpin cost? 2 taels. How long did you save? 3 months. 3 months. He received less than 1 tael each month. He had spent almost nothing on himself just to buy me a hairpin. Why? He lowered his head. The other day, when you were having your hair combed, I saw that you used only 1 wooden hairpin. Other madams have many hairpins, but you only have 1, mother. I know this one isn't very beautiful. When I have money someday, I'll buy you a better one. My hand trembled. The Lin family was the richest merchant household in Yangzhou. The jewelry in my dowry alone filled 3 whole chests. What was 1 little silver hairpin to me? I could have bought 100 of them, and yet this was the most precious gift I had ever received. Young Master Yan. He looked at me nervously. Mother, don't you like it? Of course I do. I pulled him into my arms and hugged him. I like it very much. His body went rigid, as though no one had ever embraced him before. Then, little by little, he relaxed against me and let out a tiny sigh. That sigh made my heart ache. It sounded as though he had been waiting for this hug for a very long time. I let him go and put the hairpin in my hair. Does it look nice? He nodded eagerly, smiling so widely that both dimples appeared. I turned toward Chunxing. Bring Nanny Zhang here. Nanny Zhang had managed Yanqing's affairs before. The moment she arrived, she began fawning over me. I cut straight to the point. How much of young Master Yan's allowance have you been taking? She denied everything. I laughed coldly. 2 taels every month, yet less than 1 taels reached his hands. He was only 5. He ate plain porridge and pickles, wore old clothes, and even had to buy used books from street stalls. The missing money went into your pocket, didn't it? All color drained from Nanny Zhang's face. I ordered 20 strokes with a cane and had her sold. From now on, anyone who dares skim young Master Yan's things, no matter who they are, will be beaten and expelled from this manor. The courtyard fell utterly silent. Shen Yanqing stood beside me with his head lowered. I crouched in front of him. If anyone bullies you in the future, tell me. Do you understand? He lifted tear-reddened eyes. Mother, why are you so good to me? I froze. I had asked myself that question many times too. Because you're one of us, a child of the Shen family. No child of this family is allowed to be bullied by outsiders. At last he could not hold back. Tears streamed down his face, though even his crying was quiet, as if he feared annoying me. I sighed and pulled him against my shoulder. Go ahead and cry this once, after that, no more tears. The 5-year-old child, skinny as a kitten, sobbed against me. Hearing him made my chest ache as though it were being squeezed. Chunxing secretly wiped her eyes beside us. I glared at her. Why are you crying? I'm not crying. The wind is strong. Dust got in my eyes. I patted Yanqing's back. All right? If you keep crying, the neighbors will think I beat you. He laughed through his tears. I'll work hard at swordsmanship and my books. When I grow up, I'll protect mother. Ha. I kept talking tough. I'm the daughter of a military family. Do I need you to protect me? Worry about fattening yourself up first. That night, I took the silver hairpin out and looked at it for a long time. Chunxing stood beside me and calculated aloud. Young Master Yan saved for 3 months and didn't spend a single coin on himself just to buy you that hairpin. Even a biological son might not be that thoughtful. I put the hairpin carefully into a box. Chunxing, I'm afraid I truly can't be a wicked stepmother after all. I knew that long ago. Couldn't you at least cooperate and let me pretend to struggle with my conscience for a little longer? Young lady, you've been wrestling with yourself for months. Has it changed anything? Why not stop? I glared at her and collapsed onto the bed. That boy was simply too good, so good it made my heart ache. Fine, we'll see what happens. After the new year, Shen Huaiyan returned from the frontier. It was the first time he had come back to the manor since our marriage, and I felt a little nervous, not because I was afraid to meet him, but because I feared he would discover that my treatment of the first wife's son looked nothing like that of a woman who was merely filling an empty place. The day Shen Huaiyan returned, snow was falling over the capital again. I took Yanqing to the gate to welcome him. The boy wore a new slate blue brocade robe, his hair neatly gathered into a top knot. Compared with half a year earlier, he had grown taller and his face had filled out. Yet when he saw his father's carriage approaching from far down the street, he twisted his hands together until his knuckles turned white. I had ordered that brocade robe for him in advance. It fit him far better than the faded garment he had worn when I first met him. Standing against the snow, he finally looked like a young sapling that had been properly watered and tended. But the longing in his face as he waited for his father was still just as cautious as before. I looked at his tightly clasped hands and felt inexplicably annoyed. A child seeing his own father should run over and throw himself into his arms. Why did Yanqing look as tense as a student waiting for his tutor to inspect his homework? "Don't be nervous," I said quietly. "Your father isn't a tiger." The carriage stopped. Shen Huaiyan stepped down. He was in his 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with firm features, eyes as sharp as a hawk's and skin darkened by years at the frontier. He nodded to me. "Madam." I bowed. "My lord." Then his gaze moved to his son. "Heir has grown taller." That was all. No embrace, no other sign of emotion. Yanqing's eyes immediately reddened, but he still bowed with perfect respect. "Father, I'm here to pay my respects." Shen Huaiyan gave a brief acknowledgement and went into the manor. Yanqing stood watching his father's back, and the light in his eyes slowly dimmed. I was angry on his behalf. A father saw his child only a handful of times in a year, yet came home and acted this coldly. Still, it was a matter between father and son. As the stepmother, I could hardly interfere in front of everyone. In the main hall, I asked Shen Huaiyan, "How long will you stay this time?" 15 days. "There is still much to do at the frontier." I hesitated, then said, "My lord, Heir has improved a great deal over the past 6 months. His studies are going well, and his swordsmanship has improved too. Would you like to test him?" He looked at me in surprise. "You taught him the sword?" "Only a few basic forms." I also urged him to spend more time with the boy, because Yanqing missed his father badly. Shen Huaiyan was silent for a long moment before sighing. He said he did not want to be away all year either, but the frontier could not be left unattended. The child's mother had died early and his father was absent. He truly owed Yanqing too much. For the first time, I realized this stern, unyielding general was not heartless. He simply did not know how to express himself. "Heir is very well behaved," I said. "He has never complained, but he is still a child. He needs his father's attention. You only need to spend 1 hour talking with him each day. That alone will make him happy." Shen Huaiyan's gaze softened. "Madam, you have treated him very well." My first instinct was to brush it off as nothing, but he interrupted before I could. Though he remained at the frontier, he still knew what happened in the manor. Since my arrival, Heir had new clothes, proper food, and proper instruction in his books and swordsmanship. After saying this, Shen Huaiyan stood and gave me a formal bow. "Thank you for treating Heir well." I stared in surprise at the tall man before me. Suddenly I understood. He was not a bad father, he simply did not know how to be one. It was just like me. I had once marched into this household declaring that I would become a wicked stepmother, only to discover that I did not know how to be one either. The next day, Shen Huaiyan came to the courtyard to inspect Yanqing's swordsmanship. Yanqing was so nervous he nearly knocked over a stool. When his father asked him a question, I answered first before he could speak. "He knows all the basic forms. He only lacks strength." Yanqing took a deep breath and performed a full routine. Every move was one I had taught him. He was so serious that he ignored the snow collecting on his hair and shoulders. Shen Huaiyan watched with his arms folded. His face revealed nothing, but his eyes never left the sword tip. When the routine ended, Yanqing stood panting and waited. "Very good." Only 2 words, yet the boy's eyes lit up at once. "Really, father?" "Yes, your strength is still lacking, but your posture is correct." Then Shen Huaiyan glanced at me. "You taught him quite well." I lifted my brows smugly. Yanqing was so happy he ran a circle around the courtyard, then asked whether his father could teach him a few more moves. Shen Huaiyan was silent for a moment. Then he picked up a wooden sword from the rack. "Watch carefully." That morning he spent a full 2 hours teaching his son. His father demonstrated and explained each move, while Yanqing watched without blinking for fear of missing anything. I sat under the eaves drinking tea as the father and son practiced in the snow, and the corners of my mouth kept lifting on their own. Chunxing teased me. Young lady, what are you smiling about? I'm not smiling. You're grinning from ear to ear. I immediately schooled my expression. You're seeing things. During his 15 days at the manor, Shen Huai'an made time for Yanqing every day. Sometimes he taught him swordsmanship. Sometimes he tested his lessons. Sometimes he simply sat under the eaves while the boy sat close beside him and read. Yanqing was as happy as if every day were New Year's. On one occasion he sat close beside his father with a book in his arms. For the whole time, the two hardly spoke. Shen Huai'an read official documents while the boy read his own book, occasionally lifting his head to look at his father before lowering it again. Yet that evening he still told me happily, "Father stayed beside me for 2 whole hours today." I found it both funny and heartbreaking. So that was all the child had needed from the beginning. When his father left again, Yanqing stood at the gate to see him off. He was smiling, but his eyes were red. Shen Huai'an patted his head. "Listen to your mother. I'll be away for a while, then I'll come back." Yanqing nodded hard. "Don't worry, father. I'll take good care of mother." The carriage disappeared around the corner, but he still stood there. We had taken only a few steps back into the manor when he suddenly asked, "Mother, does father not like me?" Other fathers hug their sons, but father has never hugged me. I crouched so I could look directly into his eyes. "Young Master Yan, your father doesn't dislike you. He simply doesn't know how to show what he feels. Every time he writes home, the first thing he asks is how you are doing. He doesn't know how to hug you, just like when he thinks you've done well with the sword. All he can say is very good." Yanqing thought about that and formed his own conclusion. "So father thinks it's very good. He just doesn't know how to say it?" "Exactly. So don't doubt how your father feels about you." He squeezed my hand. "Mother, how do you know everything?" Without thinking I answered, "Because I'm your mother." The moment the words left my mouth, I froze too. Why had they sounded so natural? Yanqing only smiled, his eyes curving into crescents. "Yes. You know everything, mother." The years passed. By the time Shen Yanqing was 9, 4 years had transformed the child who had once been thin as a stick into a handsome, refined boy. His swordsmanship improved steadily, and so did his studies. Even the tutors at the Imperial Academy praised him for being intelligent and diligent. As for me, I had long forgotten every fierce declaration I had once made about ruining him. All I thought about now was how to raise and educate him even better. One afternoon I was going over the household accounts when Chunxing rushed in, breathless. "Young lady, the eldest young master was bullied in the street." I slammed my brush down. "Who?" "The son of the Vice Minister of Rights and several others. They also said the eldest young master was—" I was already striding outside before she finished. Chunxing grabbed me and reminded me that I was the wife of the Marquis of Lingyang. I could not stand in the middle of the street arguing with people. I forced down my anger. "Where is Yanqing?" The boy sat on the steps by the gate with his head lowered. A large patch at his knee was torn and blood was still seeping through. The moment he saw me, he said, "Mother, I'm fine." The more he said he was fine, the angrier I became. His clothes were dusty, and his palms were bleeding too. He had plainly taken a hard fall, yet his first reaction was still to worry that I might be concerned. Chunxing brought the medicine box. I cleaned the injuries myself. When the medicine touched his skin, the boy pulled his leg back from the sting, but he bit his lip and did not make a sound. That habit of silently enduring pain had barely changed over the years. As I cleaned the wound, I asked, "Who hit you?" At first he said they were strangers. I told him he had never been good at lying, and at last he admitted it was the son of the Vice Minister of Rights and the boy's friends. "What did they say?" He was silent for a long time before answering. "They called him a freeloader. They said I had married into the Marquis household for money. They said my kindness toward him was fake, and that once his father returned, he would be driven out." He did not care what they said about him. He simply could not stand hearing them insult me, so he argued with them and was beaten. I nearly crushed the medicine bottle in my hand. I lifted his face. "Do not believe a single word of that. I don't treat you well for appearances, and I'm not pretending for anyone." The words caught in my throat. Was it because I had gone soft because I had pitied him? Or because of something else? Yanqing looked at me and waited. At last I surrendered to those eyes. "I've simply come to regard you as my own son." Satisfied, he froze. Then he broke into a brilliant smile. "Me too, I've already regarded you as my own mother." My nose stung. I turned away and pretended to complain instead. Once the injuries were bandaged, I told him to go rest while I went out to buy something. The boy immediately became suspicious. "Mother, are you going to the Vice Minister of Rights' residence?" "No. I'm going to buy face powder and rouge." You never use face powder or rouge, mother. Then I'm buying cloth for new clothes. You had 3 new outfits made last month. I ran out of excuses. He tugged at the edge of my robe. Please don't go. I don't want you to quarrel with them because of me. I reluctantly agreed not to confront them at their door, but I made him promise that if anyone bullied him again, he had to come home and tell me. He was not allowed to suffer in silence by himself. He obediently nodded. I patted his head and praised him for being good, while privately running through several ideas for how to deal with that household. Not going to their door to argue did not mean I intended to let the matter go. Someone had beaten my son into this state. If I truly pretended nothing had happened, then I, Lin Zhaoning, would have wasted all those years growing up on the frontier. That night, I tossed and turned because of his words. I already regard you as my own mother. The next morning, I told Chunxing to find out what she could about the Vice Minister of Right's household, then wrote a family letter to Shen Huaiyan. I did not mention that Yanqing had been beaten. I merely remarked in passing that the Vice Minister's son frequently caused trouble in the streets. I also happened to mention several political vulnerabilities of the Vice Minister of Rights that my maternal family had heard about. Less than 10 days later, someone submitted a memorial accusing the Vice Minister of Rights of misconduct. His son was confined to the residence for 3 months. After that, no one dared trouble Yanqing again. Chunxing raised a thumb. Young lady, that was a masterful move. I took a sip of tea. What did I do? I merely wrote a family letter to his lordship. Yes, purely a family letter. Yanqing never learned the details, which was just as well. There were some things he did not need to know. I only needed him to grow up safe and happy. Time flew. Shen Yanqing turned 15. The timid child from years ago had become a tall, handsome youth. His frame strongly resembled his father's, but his temperament was gentle and refined, like polished jade. Only the way he addressed me remained unchanged. Mother. Now the word carried complete closeness and trust. We were no different from a mother and son related by blood. Shen Huaiyan and I also had a son of our own. His childhood name was Danner and he was 7 years old. He was the exact opposite of his elder brother. Yanqing had been so obedient as a child that it hurt to look at him. Danner was so mischievous he could have annoyed even a dog. He climbed walls and pulled roof tiles loose, went down to the river to catch fish, and seemed uncomfortable if he went a single day without causing trouble. But he adored his elder brother. From the time he learned to speak, he toddled after Yanqing everywhere. When Yanqing read, Danner sat nearby and distracted him. When Yanqing practiced swordsmanship, Danner waved his arms and copied him badly. Whenever Yanqing went out, Danner insisted on following. Yanqing was endlessly patient with him. Once, Danner tore one of his brother's books. I was about to smack him when Yanqing stopped me. Mother, if a book is torn we can buy another. Danner is still little, please don't hit him. Danner hid behind his brother and even dared make a face at me. One afternoon he came running to me with an essay in his hands. Mother, brother wrote this. His tutor says it's very good. He's going to take the provincial examination this year. I stared. Yanqing was only 15. He had said he merely wanted to sit the exam to test himself. Chunxing muttered beside me. Back then, someone wanted to ruin him. Somehow she raised a prodigy instead. I immediately told her to shut up. On the day of the provincial examination, I rose early and packed his exams basket myself. 2 sets of brushes and ink in case anything went wrong, dry provisions prepared the day before, water sweetened with honey, and a thick cloak because early autumn had already turned cold. Yanqing saw me and said, Mother, let me do that myself. What do you know about what to bring? Just take the exam properly and don't embarrass me. He smiled. I definitely won't embarrass you, Mother. Danner ran out to see him off too, shouting that his brother had to pass. If Yanqing passed, Danner declared he would let his brother ride on his shoulders. Yanqing laughed, rubbed his head, and climbed into the carriage. Watching the carriage disappear, I felt as though the little bird I had raised for so many years had finally spread its wings toward a wider sky. Chunxing said my eyes were red. I insisted I simply had not slept well the night before. She immediately exposed me by saying I had been snoring soundly. I couldn't be bothered to answer her. On the day the results were posted, Danner ran home so fast he lost one shoe. Gasping for breath, he shouted. He passed! Brother placed first. His hair was a mess. One foot still wore only a sock, and he yelled himself hoarse the moment he entered the courtyard. I was drinking tea. At the words placed first, I nearly dropped my cup. Danner had no concern for dignity at all. He jumped up and down as though he were the one who had passed. First place. Yanqing walked out of his room and calmly nodded. Mother, I passed. At 15, he had taken first place in the provincial examination. I pulled him into a tight embrace. By then, he was already taller than I was. Good boy. I knew you could do it. Yanqing put his arms around me and gently patted my back just as I had once soothed him when he was small. Thank you, mother. The Marquis household held a banquet to celebrate. Danner was happier than the person who had actually passed. He had Yanqing carry him on his shoulders and clamored to go into the street for candy. Guests came to congratulate us for days on end, nearly wearing down the threshold of the manor. My back ached from receiving visitors, yet inside I was happier than anyone. The feeling was strange, like watching a tree I had tended with my own hands for 10 years finally blossom. When I remembered that I had once planned to raise him into uselessness, my old oath now seemed absurdly funny. After placing first in the provincial examination, Yanqing became famous throughout the capital. Congratulatory visitors continued to arrive in a steady stream. One evening, after the guests had finally left, he carried a bowl of snow fungus and lotus seed sweet soup into my study. Mother, there's something I want to discuss with you. What is it? I want to go to the frontier. My hand stilled around the spoon. Yanqing said studying in a room was not enough. He wanted to go to the place his father guarded day and night, learn military strategy, train his martial skills, and defend his home and country. I reminded him that he was only 15. He answered that his father had already gone into battle at 15. The serious look in his eyes was exactly the same as when he had told me as a child that he wanted to learn the sword. Does your father know? I wanted to ask you first, mother. Again and again, I asked whether he was certain. Was he afraid of the frontier winds and sand, of bitter cold, of poor food and rough sleeping conditions? He only smiled. Mother, I'm your son, I'm not that delicate. That left me with nothing to say. Fine. If your father agrees too, I won't stop you. 15 days later, a letter arrived from Shenhuaian containing only 4 words, come if you want. Yanqing was so delighted he ran 3 circles around the courtyard. I shook my head. Honestly, both father and son are so tight-lipped. With Shenhuaian's personality, those 4 words were already a major concession. Before Yanqing left, I reminded him not to worry about the household. His own safety came first. He had to look after his father, and when the weather grew cold, he must remember to add more layers. He smiled and asked, was I really that pitiful when I was small? I remember the first day we met. Your cuffs were worn to pieces. Yanqing lowered his head. Life truly wasn't easy back then. It's better now. Go make your way in the world. I'll wait for you in the capital. He looked at me, then bowed deeply. Mother, thank you for these 10 years. On the day Yanqing departed, Danner cried his eyes out and clung to his brother's sleeve. Brother, if you leave, who will play with me? Who will help me with my lessons? Who will shield me from mother's switch? Yanqing wiped his tears and told him to listen to mother. He promised to bring gifts from the frontier when he returned. Danner wailed that he did not want gifts. He only wanted his brother. I pulled him away. Your brother is going to do something important. It's not as if he will never come back. Yanqing rubbed his little brother's head, then looked at me. Mother, I'm leaving. Be careful on the road. He mounted his horse, looked back once, then urged it forward and rode away. Danner eventually cried himself to sleep in my arms. I stood at the gate staring down the long street, and my tears kept falling. Chunqing teased me again. Young lady, you're crying. I'm not. There's water on my face because it's raining. The sun is blazing. You're seeing things. She said nothing more. She merely handed me a handkerchief. Yanqing remained at the frontier for 3 years. He followed Shenhuaian, studying military strategy, practicing martial arts, and patrolling the border defenses. He changed from a scholar into a young military commander skilled in riding and archery, and even earned several modest military achievements. Shenhuaian rarely praised anyone in his letters, yet a couple of times he wrote that Yan'er endured hardship well, learned quickly, remained calm when problems arose, and was beginning to carry himself like a soldier. Reading those lines made me both proud and worried. The frontier was not the same as practicing in the safety of a courtyard. Blades showed no mercy. Whenever word came of even a small clash, I could not sleep peacefully until a letter arrived saying they were safe. Yanqing wrote every month. He never complained of hardship. He only described the scenery of the desert, the training, and the things his father taught him. At the end of each letter there was usually one sentence. Mother, you and Danner must take care of yourselves. I miss all of you very much. One line was enough for me to read again and again. Danner always fought to read the letter first, then asked when his brother would come home. I always answered, soon. But in truth, even I did not know. Fortunately, there was no major war along the frontier during those 3 years. In the autumn of the 3rd year, Shenhuaian sent a letter saying that Yan'er would soon return, not because he was leaving the army, but because he was coming back to take the metropolitan examination. 3 years earlier, he had already placed first in the provincial examination, and therefore qualified to sit for it. If he passed and received an imperial examination degree, he would have standing at court in the future as well. The moment Danner heard the news, he tumbled through several excited somersaults and ran all over the courtyard, shouting that his brother was finally coming home. Outwardly, I said, "What's there to get so excited about?" Meanwhile, I had already ordered Chunxing to prepare Yanqing's room with a new quilt, new sheets, new clothes, and replacements for anything else he might need. Chunxing laughed. "The preparations for the eldest young master's return are grander than when his lordship comes home." I glared at her. "I prepare things for his lordship too. When his lordship returns, you tell people to dust the study. When the eldest young master returns, you even air his quilt yourself." I was about to hit her, but she laughed and ran away. On the day Yanqing returned, I took Danner to wait at the gate. Danner was 10 now. He had grown much taller, though he was still as mischievous as ever. He kept craning his neck and asking when his brother would arrive, even demanding an exact answer. 15 minutes later, a group of riders appeared at the end of the street. At their head rode a young man on a chestnut horse, sitting straight and commanding in the saddle. 3 years on the frontier had tanned his skin to a honey color and sharpened his features, but his eyes were still as bright and warm as before. "Brother!" Danner shot forward like a firecracker and wrapped both arms around him, refusing to let go. "Why did you stay away for 3 whole years?" Yanqing laughed, lifted him up, and said the boy was nearly as tall as his shoulder now. Danner puffed himself up proudly. "I ate a lot every day just so you could see how much I'd grown when you came back." Yanqing looked up and saw me. He put his brother down and strode over. After 3 years apart, he was a full head taller than I was. "Mother." Before I could answer, he dropped to his knees and bowed his head to the ground. "Mother, I'm back." I caught him by the shoulders, my voice trembling. "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back." He looked at me, his eyes reddening. "You've grown thinner, Mother. Has Danner been causing trouble and worrying you again?" Danner immediately protested that he had been very good. A whole month had passed since he was last punished by being made to stand. When his brother questioned him, he guiltily revised that to 15 days. The entire family burst out laughing. Yanqing said he had brought gifts from the frontier for everyone. Danner immediately demanded to know what his share was. The 3 of us entered the manor together while Danner chattered without pause. Yanqing listened and laughed, occasionally looking over at me. The hollow feeling that had lingered in my heart for 3 years was finally filled. When we reached the main courtyard, the gifts Yanqing had brought were spread across an entire table. Small toys for Danner, several frontier specialties, and for me, things that were not especially expensive, but had plainly been chosen with great care. Danner opened his gifts with delighted chatter. I complained that Yanqing had gone all that way and still bothered with such fuss, while my hands carefully put away every single thing he had brought me. After 3 years apart, Yanqing's build, voice, and bearing had all changed. Only the way he looked at me was still the same as when he had been 5 years old. The metropolitan examination was held in the 3rd month. After returning home, Yanqing shut himself away and studied for 2 full months. Whenever Danner wanted to drag his brother out to play, I stopped him. On the day of the exam, I prepared another basket just as I had years earlier. Brushes, ink, paper, dry food, water, a cloak, and a hand warmer. Yanqing watched me arrange everything with meticulous care. "Mother, do you still remember the day I took the provincial examination?" "Of course. That day you prepared everything for me exactly like this." I told myself then that I had to do well and could not disappoint you. I handed him the basket. "Then don't disappoint me this time either." He accepted it solemnly. "I won't." On the day the metropolitan results were posted, Danner was even more nervous than I was. He paced back and forth, muttering one moment that his brother would definitely pass, and the next worrying about what would happen if he did not. I sent Chunxing to look at the list. After all, I was the mistress of the Marquis household. I had to maintain at least a little dignity. In truth, I was no calmer than Danner. I merely forced myself to sit properly and drink tea. I did not even notice when the tea in my cup went cold. Chunxing had been gone for quite a while without returning. Danner ran to the gate again and again. I kept telling him to calm down while my own eyes repeatedly drifted toward the entrance. At last Chunxing came running back, so breathless she could hardly speak. "He passed." "The eldest young master placed first in the metropolitan examination." Danner froze. "First in the metropolitan examination? Doesn't that mean first place?" "First place." He let out a yell and raced inside to tell his brother. I remained rooted to the spot. "First in the provincial examination. First in the metropolitan examination." If Yanqing also took first place in the palace examination, he would have ranked first in all 3 stages of the imperial examinations, an achievement rare even in the Great Qi dynasty. Yanqing walked out, still calm, as though he had known the result all along. Mother, I didn't disappoint you. The only words I could manage were, good boy, I knew you could do it. The palace examination took place in the 4th month and was personally presided over by the emperor. This time, I was even more nervous than Yanqing. At home, I could neither sit nor stand still. Chunqing finally said that if the eldest young master saw me like this, he would certainly laugh. He wouldn't dare. I sat down, but before enough time had passed to finish a cup of tea, I stood again. That afternoon, Chunqing burst into the room with an expression even more dramatic than last time. Young lady. The eldest young master. My heart leaped into my throat. What happened to him? Top scholar. The eldest young master took first place in the palace examination. First in all 3 examinations. The teacup slipped from my hand and shattered. First in the provincial examination, first in the metropolitan examination, and first in the palace examination. He was only the 5th person since the founding of Great Qi to place first in all 3 stages. When Yanqing returned, he wore the bright red robes of the top scholar, with a yellow flower adorning his head, and rode from the imperial palace back to the Marquis manor. The whole capital poured into the streets to watch. Everywhere, people marveled that the Zhenbei Marquis household had produced a top scholar who had ranked first in all 3 examinations. I stood inside the manor, listening to the noise rolling down the street from afar. Only when that red-robed figure appeared did I truly believe this was the child I had raised for so many years. More than a decade earlier, he had sat under the eaves clutching a battered 1,000-character classic. Today, he rode through the entire capitals as the top scholar. Emotion tightened my throat. He dismounted, and Danner was the first to rush toward him. Yanqing rubbed his brother's head, then walked directly to me. From inside his robe he took out a brilliant golden imperial edict. Holding it in both hands, he knelt and raised it toward me. Mother, I asked His Majesty to grant you an honorary court title. I stared at him. He had just taken first place in the palace examination, yet the first thing he had asked for was not an office for himself, but an honorary court title for me. Yanqing told the emperor that everything he had achieved came from his mother's upbringing. Although I was not his birth mother, I had treated him better than one, so he had requested an imperial honor in repayment. Mother, this is the finest gift I can give you. My hands trembled as I accepted the edict. Its meaning was clear. The edict referred to the Marquis of Zhenbei's wife as Madame Shen, praised her virtue and propriety and her skill in raising her children, and granted her a second-rank honorary court title. My tears fell onto the golden scroll. My dowry had once filled chest after chest, and I had received many precious treasures. Yet in that moment I remembered the 2-tail silver hairpin from years ago. When Yanqing was small, he saved for 3 months to buy me the best thing he could afford. Now that he was grown, he used the greatest glory of his life to obtain an imperial honor for me. From beginning to end, that heart of his had never changed. You silly boy. Who told you to go asking for something like this? I wanted you to be happy, Mother. Are you happy? Happy, my foot. I'm crying like this, and you're still asking? He wiped away my tears. You cry when you're happy and when you're unhappy, Mother. But this time, you're crying because you're too happy, right? I was torn between irritation and laughter and gave his shoulder a light tap. Beside us, Danner bounced impatiently. Brother, why didn't you ask His Majesty for something for me? I want something too. What do you want? I want to be an official. I want to be a great general, one even higher ranking than father. Then first you'll have to take first place in the martial examination. I'll do it. I'll take the exam tomorrow. I grabbed him. First practice those ugly chicken scratch characters of yours until they look presentable. Then you can talk. The whole family burst into laughter. Chunqing secretly wiped her eyes nearby. I glared at her and she immediately sniffed and insisted, I'm not crying. That evening, the Marquis household held a grand banquet. Yanqing was made to drink quite a bit. His face reddened, but he kept smiling. After all the guests had left, he came to my study and stood in the doorway. Mother, I'm truly very happy today. Seeing that he had drunk too much, I started to help him back to bed, but he suddenly asked, Do you still remember the first time we met? I remember. Back then, I thought you would be like the wicked stepmothers in stories and treat me terribly. But you didn't. You gave me new clothes, taught me the sword, bought me books, and stood up for me when I was bullied. You treated me even better than my birth mother. My nose stung. Why bring all of that up now? I only wanted to thank you. Mother, thank you for not becoming a wicked stepmother. I looked at him and laughed. Who says I didn't? Back then, I made a grand declaration that I would raise you into a good-for-nothing. Look at what happened instead. I somehow raised a top scholar who placed first in all 3 examinations. My performance as a wicked stepmother was a complete disaster. Yanqing stared for a second, then laughed too. His eyes curved and those 2 dimples appeared again. For an instant, he looked exactly like the timid little boy from more than 10 years ago. Mother, you're the best stepmother I've ever known. I patted his shoulder. All right, go to sleep. There will be plenty to do tomorrow. He took a few steps, then turned back. Mother, sleep well. Sleep well. Left alone in the study, I lowered my eyes to the imperial edict and remembered the first day I had stepped into the Marquis manor. Back then, when that thin, timid child called me mother, I had secretly thought I would definitely raise him into uselessness. Now that very child had knelt at my feet, presented me with an imperial honor, and thanked me for raising him. The story had gone far off script. I smiled and carefully put the imperial edict away. Going off script like this had turned out pretty well. Epilogue 6 years later, Danner passed the martial examination and finally got his wish to guard the frontier. Before leaving, he took Shen Yanqing's hand. Brother, I'm going to the frontier to protect father. You stay in the capital and protect mother. We'll each guard one place, one of us at the frontier, the other in the capital. Neither of us is allowed to slack off. Yanqing laughed. All right, I won't slack off. Danner turned to me. Mother, after I leave, don't be a crybaby. Brother will still be in the capital to keep you company. If you miss me too much, ask him to tell you some jokes. He isn't very good at telling jokes, but you'll have to make do. I burst out laughing. Who would miss you? Once you're gone, I'll finally have some peace and quiet. There you go, talking tough again. He made a face, jumped onto his horse and waved. Brother, mother, I'm leaving. I stood at the gate watching him for a long time, until his figure disappeared at the end of the street. Yanqing spoke softly beside me. Mother, let's go inside, the wind is strong. I nodded. After we had taken a few steps, he said again, Mother, don't worry, I will always stay by your side. I looked up. He was now 1.5 heads taller than I was. Standing beside me, steady as a great tree, he seemed capable of sheltering me from wind and rain. I know. Yanqing smiled and gently brushed aside a strand of hair the wind had blown across my face. Come on, mother, let's go home. All right. Let's go home. Sunlight shone on the 4 golden characters above the gate that read, Zhenbei Marquis Manor. I stepped through the gate, then turned to look once more at the long street behind me. Perhaps this was the best possible ending.